Jimmy break in finance. You're live.
Why is that bad?
Okay, we're live.
We don't want to.
Good morning. Sorry for the delay. The Finance Committee is starting at 10:11 on April 27th. All members are present, that being Alderwoman Finlayson on my right and Alderwoman Karma O'Neill on my left. And we also have in attendance Alderman Arnett and Alderman Gay. At this time, could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the agenda as written.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Alrighty, at this time, can I entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting April 26, 2022?
Move approval of the minutes from April 26, 22.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We do not have any fund transfers at this time or supplemental appropriations, so without further waiting, we will have a presentation by our Department of Public Works, who will introduce themselves. As you probably know, we are having the presentations uninterrupted, and then they will be followed by questions from my colleagues on the Standing Committee, and then by my colleagues on the Council. We have 3 hours for your presentation plus the enterprise fund. So with that, just introduce yourselves and carry on.
Okay, well, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Mike Johnson, Director of Public Works.
Marcia Patrick, Assistant Director of Public Works.
This morning we just want to go through our proposed operating budget, and we'll start with.
This mic's on, right?
Am I advancing the slides, Dickie? Dickie, am I advancing the slides?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me go to view. Okay. Slideshow. Slideshow. Yes. Okay. Okay, great, thank you. So the Public Works Department is comprised of several divisions: administration, services, which is responsible for a lot of what the public sees, snow plowing, street sweeping, things of that nature. Utilities, who is responsible for conveyance of stormwater to the bay, as well as maintaining our sanitary sewer system. Engineering and construction, facility, fleet maintenance, our water treatment plant, and our solid waste division. So this slide here shows the respective divisions and gives the general titles that are in the division, along with the full-time equivalents for them. Going to the highlights for 2022, we had a very successful year, even though it was extremely challenging, being in the throes of 2 COVID outbreaks, the Delta as well as the Omicron variants. But during the entire episode, Public Works remained fully operational, and we're able to provide assistance and management services and materials for the restaurant recovery zones, which was essential to the city's economic base. And we also began work on our departmental career ladder initiative. This was particularly challenging to be done during COVID because mass assembly kind of dictated when we could meet and numbers of people that could meet. But we were able to get a broad representation, cross-sectional representation from the department, and working together, both supervisors and line staff, as well as Marcia, the assistant director, we were able to work through the basic framework of what our career ladder initiative would look like. And the staff have to be complimented. They did an excellent job. They worked really hard. We started working it in last October, and we sort of buttoned it up a few weeks ago with more or less a revamped set of skill profiles that are very clear for each position, so that when implemented, it would sort of remove uncertainty among the staff as to what skills they need to acquire to advance themselves throughout their career with Public Works, which was an essential part of addressing morale issues and making the workplace more engaged, the workers more engaged in their jobs. We began preparation of bid specs for the new citywide janitorial contract. Our existing janitorial contract is more than 20 years old. It's had modifications over the years, but things have changed, in particular use of low VOC materials for cleaning, other green elements and sustainable elements that should be in a modernized specification, as well as changing some of the contract control provisions. That is sort of being undertaken right now. It's about 3/4 way done as we speak. We revamped our statistical data collection and reporting, and we have begun planning for a citywide solid waste survey. The purpose of the survey is to answer a couple of important points. One of them is, do we extend the pilot for food composting citywide? We did a pilot that sort of appeared to have like mixed results. It wasn't really definitively clear definitive that it was a success in the sense and that in terms of participation. And the thought of how we would expand that citywide, which could result in costs to the citizens or fee changes, we really wanted to get a cross-sectional opinion a statistically based opinion from the community as to whether or not this is something that makes sense for us to embark on. We will also take the opportunity in this survey to test questions such as other types of services that could be provided as part of our solid waste program, that without doing that, they're sort of educated guesses, and those sorts of guesses will cost money. So we want to have a basis for making a good decision. So that's underway. We redesigned the solid waste webpage and are embarking on an extensive amount of customer service education for proper curbside collection. One of the initiatives that we did do last year as well is we began to rigorously enforce the containerized provisions of the solid waste statutes. We had many communities where refuse was just placed in bags adjacent to curbs, to cans, and that sort of generated a lot of feral animals, rodents, and scavenger birds that would broach the bags. And it's really a health issue as well as part of a violation of the MS4 provision, because when it rains, that organic material will make its way into the bay eventually and sort of enrich the streams in a way that we don't want that done. So we were very successful. I mean, there were one or two people who did complain, but it wasn't a very large number. But most people complied and appreciated the effort for us to do this, that we undertook doing this. And I think, in the bi-weekly meetings that we have on this, I think most people are on board. We really have not had to write any summonses or take any enforcement action. It has been a great success and a great improvement in general. For engineering services, we painted a pedestrian walkway along Poplar Avenue. We received bids for the renovation of Maynard Burgess House. We completed the long-delayed Truxton Park tennis court project and pickleball project. We installed a traffic calming pilot along Melvin Avenue and resurfaced about 3.4 miles of roadways. And we'll probably finish another 0.5 miles before the fiscal year is over. We really outperformed our metric with the amount of square feet of sidewalk that were replaced. We did more than 50,000 square feet of sidewalk. And stormwater staff developed an illicit discharge detection elimination manual, and that was done in-house, which is, part of the capacity building that is important for our MS4 program. We could have paid a contractor to do this, but the feeling was, myself discussing it with Marcia, the feeling was that this is something that we had the capability to do in-house. They did an excellent job in putting that together. Our work group did a great job putting that together, and we've actually had the opportunity to try it out on 2 recently reported illicit discharges, and it has worked very well. We also coordinated with OEM on this and the fire department to ensure that our reporting protocols were correct. One of the deficiencies that existed prior to this was that a report of an illicit discharge, we had, in my opinion, the wrong staff reporting to the site. In other words, someone from utilities, if a spill has been reported in a creek, someone from utilities would dutifully and very conscientiously show up to see what the problem is. It sounds like a good idea, but it's really a very, very bad idea, because sometimes the discharge from the spill could have no odor, but it could be toxic, or it could in some way either sicken or incapacitate the person responding. So we sort of cleaned that up to make sure that the correct people are responding, and we would sort of, if we had something like that, we would now report it to 911, where someone from fire would respond. They have the turnout gear, they have the training, and the expertise in identifying hazard material. And then they sort of serve as the triage agent and say, well, this is not something that we need to deal with. This is something more appropriate for Public Works or maybe MDE or whoever the party is to respond to it. So that sort of helps to keep our workers safe who are responding to this important aspect. We completed redevelopment of well number 6 at the Annapolis Water Plant, completed lead and copper sampling programs. We began construction of the new Public Works maintenance facility, and that's going very well. Finalized design on the Church Circle traffic signal replacement project, and that'll be soon out to bid. Completed design for the City Harbor flood mitigation project phase 1, that's currently on the street. Completed construction of the Guardians of the First Amendment Memorial. This is a memorial to commemorate those journalists who unfortunately lost their lives due to they're exercising their First Amendment right as journalists. We completed the FY21 NPDES MS4 annual report, and that's our permit, stormwater permit that we have with the state. We completed design and public outreach for Cheston Avenue, bulkhead replacement. Lots of work is ongoing with sewer cleaning and relining. We upgraded the Whiten Court pump station and several water main replacements. One of the issues we're facing with water main replacements is the supply chain issue with ductile iron pipe. The lead time on the pipe is anywhere from 4 to 6 months to receive the schedule of pipe that we have specified. So that has the potential, if that supply chain doesn't correct itself, to add some delays and possible costs to projects that were designed and bid before. So it hasn't occurred yet, but it's something that could happen. The Parkside Preserve new pressure zone construction is underway, and that would sort of like address a long-standing issue in a portion of that subdivision. We replaced the Annapolis Police Headquarters HVAC system and have begun design work on the Truxton Heights storm drain project. as well as temporary sidewalk for Cedar Park Drive that was completed in 22 as well. We addressed several water main breaks, replaced meters, cleaned sewer pipes and catch basins, repaired sidewalks, swept large number, more than 2,700 miles of streets, painted more than 4,000 linear feet of red curb. And on the issue with red curbs, that is proving to be a very capital-intensive activity. And one of the problems with the red curb is that it is unenforceable in the winter. In other words, the fact that a curb is painted red, if the inspector cannot see the curb being red, it's like if the plows go by and the windrow is pushed up over the curb, they really can't write a summons for that. They could, but it's not really going to, if someone challenged it, you really have no defense. So would like to move away from that to what is more standard in municipalities, where signs are used, which sort of prohibit parking from here to corner, or whichever zones that is. And we have to be sensitive, particularly in the historic district, with their concerns about sign pollution. But it would be in other areas of the city, possibly even in Eastport, we feel that we're applicable, that those would be better treatments than trying to paint the red curb. The red curb is really very expensive, and we don't really have a lot of staff who do it. It ties up a lot of staff time doing it. We repaired 719 potholes through last December. Facilities has done quite a large number of work orders through December as well. And I spoke about the garbage containerized enforcement. We collected more than 4,300 tons of refuse, 1,500 tons of recycling, and 1,100 tons of yard waste. Fleet has performed more than 300 PM preventive maintenance repairs, and we produced during the period through March of this year more than 664 million gallons of potable water. And our water reports are excellent every reporting period. We have no findings or environmental concerns with that. Our goals for 2023, we want to continue providing excellent drinking water and sewer collection services to our residents, our customers, maintain a high-quality street system that supports vehicles, cyclists, as well as makes it more walkable. One of the things that we are looking at with our streets is to introduce some alternate paving methodologies. Right now, the standard methodology that we use is to mill and overlay. So we'd mill off 2 inches and pave 2 inches. But there are other treatments that can not only allow our budgets to go further, but are very effective, particularly for residential streets. Micro paving, that's where a very thin layer of asphalt and stone mix is laid down on roads that are appropriate for that. And that has quite a long service life. It's at least 10 or 15 years, particularly for residential streets. What really destroys the street, if you will, is the number of truckload cycles that you have. Your car does not really do much damage to the road. It is the long wheelbase vehicles like buses and trucks that are heavy and long that sort of do damage to the road. So since residential streets tend not to get a large percentage of truck traffic, that seems to be appropriate. So we are meeting with a contractor this Friday who does this for the county, for Anne Arundel County, and we will sort of investigate to see if on a pilot basis we can introduce that paving methodology, which I think would allow us to do even more miles of roads in a way that is faster. One of the complaints that we get is that it takes a while to pave. That's true. It probably takes about 20 years to pave if you were to pave the streets. Like they're probably on that cycle if you really looked at it. Not that they're in bad condition because of what I explained with the truck traffic, but it would sort of allow us to shorten that period of time and to to have a higher ride quality in general, network-wide in the city. We want to continue providing reliable collection of trash, recycling, and yard trim, and reliable maintenance for all our vehicles, as well as professional project management and oversight for our capital improvement projects. So I will go through the goals. Do you want to go through the goals? Or no? You're good? Okay. Okay, fine. Okay, so the first goal is to maintain clean and serviceable streets. And our objective is to ensure streets are pothole-free and to ensure streets are clean. And one of the questions that came up, I guess if I would just go to that, was raised is how many street miles have been swept in the past fiscal year? In 2021, we swept 7,003 miles of streets. And in 2022, we have swept, as of March, about 3,648 miles. And that's, so through the end of the fiscal year, if you project that, that would be close, about 5,800, somewhere thereabouts, miles of streets that will be swept. I suspect one of the reasons why it's lower this year is that more people were at home due to worked at home. So we can't really sweep a street if cars don't move. We rarely sweep the gutter line. So if cars are always there, like if someone is home during the day, which they're not normally, rarely those streets cannot be swept. So that probably accounts for the reduction in that. The number of potholes repaired, that's a sort of a funny benchmark for us because that really is predicated by the type of winter that we have. If you have a really brutal winter, you'll have a lot of potholes. If you have milder winters as we've had over the past 3 or 4 years in general, they would be lower. So the number of potholes repaired were 1124, but we are sort of very proactive in repairing potholes. As soon as we get the complaint, more or less we address it in a very timely fashion, and I'm pretty satisfied with our performance on that. Goal number 2, provide functional city buildings in a cost-effective manner. Our objective is to ensure upkeep and maintenance of city buildings. Benchmark was to perform 750 work orders completed. As of March, we have done 536, so we're right on track in terms of meeting that goal by the end of the fiscal year. I'm sorry, going backwards. Goal number 3, provide high-quality, safe drinking water to all customers. And the objective is to implement an effective asset management system for the water distribution system. The benchmarks that we had were 5,000 feet of water mains scanned for leaks, 300 water valves exercised, tested, and inspected, and 5,000 feet of water lines replaced. We have scanned 91, as of March, 91,600 linear feet of water mains for leaks, so we're well above the benchmark. Exercised 226 valves, and that's as of March, so we're going to exceed the benchmark again. And water lines replaced 750 linear feet. Part of it has to do with what I mentioned with the supply chain issue with the ductile iron pipes. We have some large projects that are ongoing and in the offing, but there's a possibility that, as I mentioned, that supply chain could be a problem with adding several months lead time to getting the material to do the work. But in terms of what we have programmed, we would have been on track to sort of exceed this as well. Goal 4, provide worry-free utility services to all our customers. The objective is to implement an effective asset management system for the sewer collection system. 20,000 benchmark was 20,000 feet of sewer mains inspected by closed-circuit television, 100 sewer manholes inspected, and 6,000 feet of sewer lines lined or replaced. We have exceeded, as of March, we've inspected 27,458 linear feet of sewer mains, manholes 61, so we will exceed or be close to, I think probably just around the benchmark by the end of the fiscal year. And we have relined and replaced 12,151 linear feet as of March. So we're well outperforming our benchmark on that as well. Goal number 5, proactive, high effective asset management on the utility system. Our objective is to maximize preventive maintenance of sewer lines, inspect fire hydrants annually, maximize the preventative maintenance of storm drains, and produce high-quality drinking water. The benchmarks are 200,000 feet of sewers checked and cleaned, 100% of hydrants, 1,300 inspected, 12,500 feet of storm drain pipe checked and cleaned, and no water quality issues on an annual basis. Thus far, we have maintained 110 linear feet of sewer mains, inspected 475 hydrants, and I believe that COVID had something to do with the number. We're not likely to meet our benchmark for the inspection for this particular performance measure. And we had issues with staffing and crewing guys together that sort of impacted the ability to dispatch people exclusively to do this. So I think that this is a collateral damage resulting from what occurred over the past year. 1,525 linear feet of storm pipe maintained, and we had no water quality issues. Provide very high quality drinking water. Goal 6, provide high quality environmentally friendly solid waste services to residents. The objective was to maximize customer service provided to residents, minimizing the validated complaints received by customers, and maximize the collection of recyclable materials, maximize the collection of yard trim, and maximize the diversion rate of materials going to a landfill. The benchmarks were no more than 10 validated complaints each month, 3,500 tons of recycling collected, 1,500 tons of yard trim collected, and a 12-month rolling diversion rate greater than 45%. We had no validated customer complaints. As of March, we've collected a little over 2,200 tons of recycling. So we're on track to meet that. Tons of yard trim collected, 1,452 as of March, so we are going to exceed that. And our 12-month rolling diversion rate is 36.8%. And we are working to bring that number up to the benchmark of 45. Goal 7, provide reliable, serviceable fleet assets to internal city customers in a cost-effective manner. The objective is to optimize the average age of the fleet for the fire department, police department, all other city departments, maximize the number of preventive maintenance orders performed, and minimize the number of emergency road calls that have to be made. That's when a fleet unit would break down due to it probably being improperly maintained. The benchmark was the optimal average age of fleets. Our fire department, we wanted 7 years for their equipment, police 7 years, and all other departments 8 years, 400 preventive maintenance calls performed, and no more than 250 road calls. The average age of our fire department equipment as of March, 7.54, so we're more or less in the pocket with that. Police department, 7.15, again, and all other department, 10.23. So there'll be some replacements that will help to sort of improve that number, but that's what we had for last year. The number of preventive maintenance activities performed is 427, so we're exceeding the benchmark. And the number of emergency road calls as of March was 55, so we will be well beneath what the benchmark is for that. Goal number 8 was to recapitalize city infrastructure assets, our streets, sidewalks, and utilities in an effective and cost-efficient manner. The objective was to implement a pavement management system to achieve a 20-year service life for all city streets, implement an effective sidewalk replacement program, ensure that water distribution system recapitalization occurs, and ensure that sewer collection system recapitalization occurs as well. The benchmarks were 4.5 miles of road resurfaced, 15,000 square feet of sidewalks replaced, 5,000 feet of water lines replaced, and 6,000 feet of sewer mains relined or replaced. We have resurfaced 3.39 miles of sidewalks thus far. Square feet of sidewalk replaced 51,500. Linear feet of water lines replaced 750. And again, that's tied to the availability of piping. And linear feet of sewer mains relined or replaced 12,151 linear feet. And our goal number 9, the last goal, is to complete capital projects on time and within budget. Ensure that on-time completion of key capital projects occurs. Ensure that budget completion of key capital projects that were within budget. The benchmarks being that all projects are completed on time and all projects completed within budget. The performance measure, number of projects completed by scheduled completion date. This one is a little of a challenging metric because the projects are really, it's probably when you define the project is complete. I guess the time when the project is truly complete is when you've settled all claims, change orders, things of that nature. And sometimes it drags on beyond the scheduled beneficial use date for the project. And always the project can be used, but you're still closing it out. So we have completed the pool project last year as well as the courts. Budgets, I think that's an area in which we are working to try to improve that. We have not always brought the projects in, delivered the projects under budget. And I think that has to do with some of the changes that were made to the capital improvement process, whereby we are scoping projects in a more detailed way prior to the project beginning, so that you don't have a guess. We don't come to the council with a guess for the figure that we were asking for. So at least it's not too crazy a guess. It's a bit of a guess, but not a wild guess of what we're asking for. So that would sort of help to ensure that you don't really have massive changes in the budgetary figures. Sorry, let's take a sip of water. Thank you. Our fiscal year 24 through 27 long-term goals: to achieve national standing for the department as employees via APWA certification, provide superior customer service to constituents and customers, establish a continuous improvement culture, establish and implement life cycle asset management programs for city assets, maintain a complete, safe, high-quality street system that supports vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians. Pardon me, I went too fast. And provide responsive and professional service delivery. And our fiscal 22 performance measures, we want to accentuate the measures that were most successful, and the linear feet of water mains scanned for leaks, that was wildly successful. Linear feet of sewer mains relined or replaced, as well as square feet of sidewalks replaced. Areas where the measures sort of fell below the benchmark were linear feet of stormwater drain pipe maintained, number of fire hydrants inspected, and linear feet of water mains replaced. And 1 and 3 are related to supply chain issues, and 2, I suspect, had to do with our revamped operational approach during the COVID pandemic, whereby we could not crew guys to sort of take care of that. It affected our operations in ways we still got work done, but not as efficiently as would have happened if we did not have to implement that. The next are the summary of our budget requests, and I'll just go through those, scan through those very quickly. And I want to focus on changes from fiscal year 22. In Public Works Administration, we had an increase of $6,000 for added Gmail expenses. That was provided to us by MIT as to what the expense would be. For engineering construction, an increase of $50,000 for independent contractor traffic engineer. This position has been very challenging to fill on a full-time basis, and we have pivoted and are using a a contract traffic engineer to assist staff with a lot of, the complaints that we receive regarding speeding and roadway geometry and things of that nature. An additional $42,000 was added for Wells Cove improvements. For streets, we had an increase of $26,600, and that's a 3% inflation increase. For traffic control and maintenance, an increase of $1,600. Again, that's a 3% inflation. For snow and ice, this fiscal year, we would like to introduce a different tool to our snow and ice control methodologies. Our current methodology is to spread salt based on the temperature that we're experiencing. The amount of pounds of salt per mile is adjusted, and the spreaders spread that. There is that works very well, and it's a very tried and true approach. But there's a different way in which snow and ice control can be addressed. What I described, it would be called de-icing. Like the road could ice up, and then if the temperature is above 20 degrees Fahrenheit, you can spread salt, and it will melt the ice under the friction from tires and so on. But there's a different approach that's called anti-icing. So it's a proactive approach. So what you do is that if you mix what they discovered, I think the University of Iowa was they sort of were the pioneers with this. They did they developed the technology, helped develop the technology, and they found that if you mix brine, which is a liquid salt, a liquid solution of salt, and you spray that on the roads ahead of the storm, that it prevents or minimizes severely ice from being able to stick to the road, or precipitation from falling on the road and freezing. And once it freezes, it is very hard to get it up. It's dependent on ambient temperature, pavement temperature, and various factors. So sometimes some roads are really challenging to remove the ice from if it ices. The de-icing through the use of brine would prevent that from occurring, because there's a layer of salt between the road as well as the precipitation that has fallen. And even though it's very small, you can't see it with your eye, it's there, and it allows the plows to be able to push that off, so you don't really get icing on the roads. One of the other benefits of the brine production is that it reduces significantly the amount of salt, about 30% reduction in the amount of roadway salt that is needed to be effective. Because as the trucks are traveling, the salt is traveling the same speed that the vehicle is traveling at, and when you throw it out, the spinners are throwing it, a lot of it bounces off. About 30% of it hits the road, bounces off to the side. It doesn't stay on the road. So you're actually not only salting the road, you're salting the adjacent grass or whatever it is, sidewalks and so on like that. So it's not the most environmentally friendly way to de-ice, but even though it's essential. So the brine production machine that we're proposing to sort of coincide with the opening of our new maintenance facility will introduce to our snow and ice fighting operations an additional tool that will improve the overall rideability and safety of our roads during inclement weather. So this was $70,000 for that, as well as for 2 spray tanks. And that has been offset by a $20,000 reduction in the snow budget overall. For facilities, an increase of $42,000, and that's a 3% inflationary increase. Our sewer fund, an increase of $1.5 million, 3% increase. Water fund, increase of a little over $200,000, and that's a 3% increase. And for a watershed restoration fund, about a little over $600,000, and that's a 3% increase. For the watershed restoration, for the stormwater program, and I'll speak about that a little later, we are proposing to research, we have recently become responsible for the entire program. The way that stormwater was organized in the city is that it had, and in many cities, Annapolis is not unique in this way, is that it was resident in many departments. It was not resident in one place. The the city manager made the decision to co-locate the stormwater program in Public Works, which I think is the right place for it to be resident. And part of allowing that program to move forward is the need for a new position for program manager, the person who would sort of be responsible for making sure that the 6 minimum control measures are all attained. Only 2 of those are engineering-based. The other 4 are not engineering-based. So we would sort of be looking for a person who can move in both worlds. That'd be the appropriate type of a person to sort of function in that role, because there's a lot of outreach. There are a lot of other environmentally based initiatives that are part of, requirements that are part of the permit that this position would be needed for. In addition, we also need a new environmental compliance inspector. And that has come about because we have recently changed our ESC, our erosion sediment control protocols, and with more rigorous inspections of sites. The one inspector that we have, with the number of sites that we have, cannot maintain that workload. That would not be possible. So we need an additional inspector, and that is part of what that increase is. Contract services, the refuse fund saw an increase of $300,000, and that's a 3% increase for increased fuel costs and disposal, tipping fees for trash, yard trim, and recycling. And fleet operations saw an increase of $14,550 for inflation. There's a new item here, the training and education. This is part of our Career Ladder Initiative. One of the benefits of the Career Ladder Initiative is that in addition to identifying the skills that we would like staff to have for each position, is also the commitment of the city to provide training opportunities that would allow staff to attain those skills. They were not, because there is a benefit that benefits them, and it also benefits us if our workforce is better trained. So for this year, we're proposing to add $100 per employee for all divisions for additional training as part of the Career Ladder Initiative. And that's what that increases. Fleet has a budget of $1.5 million for replacements. This year, we're proposing to purchase a new sweeper that would be funded from the Water Restoration Fund for $285,000. Now, we have in our inventory 3 sweepers, but they're all broom sweepers. They're all use brooms. The broom sweepers, while they are good at picking up litter, they are not very efficient from a stormwater perspective. They do not pick up nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium, as well as what are called regenerative air sweepers. So this is for a regenerative air sweeper, and this will give us credits to our permit. It's the equivalents are almost double what we would get for using a broom sweeper to sweep. Utility body trucks and one pickup truck, as well as a replacement SUV that it would be an electrical vehicle, would also be funded by the water fund. And remaining funds will be used to cover portions of what is left over in the replacement schedule. We had a few enhancement requests. The traffic engineer, independent contractor that I mentioned, we requested $27,000, which would be used to bring a previous approved position up to, we had a previously approved position of a person who would sort of, no, I'm sorry, that's not what this for. This here would add to provide additional, hours so that we would have full coverage for the traffic engineer that is needed. Right now, one of the staff that has been doing this for a while is very tied up with the flood control initiatives and is no longer able to really function in that role efficiently. The BGE environmental sensor,
Director,
I'm sorry.
Excuse me, just to save time, as you go through these enhancement requests, are you able to tell us which ones are included in the mayor's budget and which ones are not?
Yes, it's, the only one that was not was the second one, the BGE environmental sensor.
Thank you, sorry for interrupting.
That's okay. Would you like me to go through in detail with it, or?
No, we'd just like to know what's in the mayor's budget and then what wasn't.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
The second one, the BG environmental sensor, was not included in the budget. The brine production machine that I spoke about, that's included. And we're converting 2 contractual fleet maintenance technicians to civil service. The stormwater manager position that I mentioned and the environmental compliance inspector position, those were also included in the budget. And we also are requesting $50,000 to provide additional contractual support for training and public education for pollution prevention. And that's part of our MS4 requirement. And that's funded from the Watershed Restoration Fund. And the rest are sort of charts that I will just skim through. So I think that's what I had, and I would sort of stop and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, and thank you for accommodating me with the pie charts. Thank you. I'm a visual person, so I have some questions, and they're mostly yes, no, so hopefully I won't take up too much time. On the watershed restoration budget summary, obviously it's for lack of a better word, underfunded, if you will. I mean, it's the expenses are more than the revenues. Actually, I should go back to your slide. I'm looking at where's watershed? It's on. Are they numbered? Oops, no. Well, will you have the budget summaries?
So was there a particular page that you're on? I'm sorry.
I don't. Oh, there's the page numbers. I apologize. Watershed is on page 25.
25. Okay, let's see.
I assume that is, and I always. I mean, I saw this coming. This is all MS4 dictated, isn't it?
It is MS4 dictated, yes.
Yeah, so it's not, it's a no, yeah, so we have to do this.
We have to use it. It's the money has to be used for things that provide credits or sort of treat the stormwater.
Okay. And on revenue, and on the refuse, is that the same situation that happened last year, new contractor, and is that due to?
We haven't changed the contract. We have a long-standing contract with Reinvest that provides most of the support for this activity. So that has not changed, really. I mean, what we are doing with them is sort of, I think that a lot of the planning work was being done, the building of the geodatabases, which is an essential part of what is needed. And now we're getting ready to actually do some construction projects that were sort of planned ahead of time. So we were building up work, and then we will start building it.
Okay. I thought Annapolis Fire Department inspected the hydrants.
It is the utilities.
Okay.
Right, utilities does that. They do the inspections.
My error. So, and what is a rolling diversion rate?
The rolling rate is that you're looking at, and it's not like every 3 months. So as the year moves on, you're sort of taking an average, like a 3-month average of.
Okay, the
of what
cycle.
is occurring.
Okay,
right.
Got it. Okay. There is a Talk to Me site on the city website. Is that your vehicle for getting complaints? Because if you go to your website now, I see that there's a text message option. So I was just a little confused on what is the best way to report for a resident to report a problem directly to the city. Is it still Talk to My City?
Talk to My City works well. I mean,
Okay.
it will go to the appropriate staff, and they would be able to address it.
Okay.
I'm not so familiar with the text, with the text feature, but.
Yeah, I
Talk
saw
to
that
Me
on your
is-
website,
yeah.
and it confused me. When you mentioned micro paving, is that on existing, so you don't have to do milling? So it's beneficial cost-wise?
It's, you don't have to mill, so there's less volatile organic compounds that are released but you do have to treat the surface to be able to, like with the tactile material, to be able to take the surfacing that you're putting down on it. But the road has to be in a certain condition before every road is not suitable for it. Like if it's too far degraded, you can't really use that efficiently. So an assessment is made of the road. You would sort of place the tactile material, and then you would spray this surface on. And it's very thin. It's a micro surface, but very strong and can carry vehicular weights very efficiently.
I say this trepidatiously because I know you know how to manage a department, but let me just ask anyways. Have you evaluated outsourcing estimating these projects based on some of these issues we've had with the initial budgets and the overruns? Have you looked at that?
We have not looked at it because, and when I looked at it, I think I stumbled upon or discovered what the problem had been. I think that when projects were making it into the CIP, into the Capital Improvement Program, they were not entering with a detailed enough scope of work, so that the engineers, when they're asked to give an estimate, they're using a very rough figure. They might compare it to a project that they did somewhere else. They may not be entirely the same or face the same issues. You could have right-of-way issues, you could have utility issues, you could have grading issues, or any number of things that could add cost or delay to the project. So one of the big changes, or the large change that was made to the process, just a tweak, was to say that before projects are allowed to enter the CIP, I really want the engineers to take a deeper dive into what sorts of issues they're likely to face, and therefore to be able to properly account for those in terms of cost and schedule. So the information that we are relaying is better. Of course, it haven't really completed the design, so there would be some error in the number that they come, but it should not be double or something like that. We shouldn't have to come back and say, oh, listen, we missed it by $100,000 or something, because they've done enough preliminary assessments. And once that is done, and that's through our project initiation form process, the acronym being PIF, so that sort of forces them to sort of go through, forces in quotes, it requires them to go through a more detailed analysis of the project in terms of all the kinds of costs and risks that are associated with doing the project, and therefore to come with a better budget number. And then they do what they do. They'll deliver the project. So I don't think that it would be money well spent to bring in an outside, an external.
It sounds like you're addressing the problem. And I know that the storm water requirements has been an impact as well. Very quickly, aging infrastructure. Is that addressed in your, I assume now your labor force is becoming more labor intensive, and productivity might slow down, or I assume that that's addressed in your budget. Do you know what I'm asking?
No, I didn't quite understand the question.
I mean, has the amount, I saw the numbers of sewer, water, water breaks, that kind of thing, usually due to aging infrastructure. Is that going to increase? Or you're comfortable with what you have in the budget to address?
Okay, I understand. Yes, I think I'm comfortable with what we have here, because we are following an asset management. This was developed by City Manager Gerald when he was Public Works Director.
And it's fine. Okay, we're good. We're good. Okay.
Right. So it has been addressed. They sort of look at consequence of failure, probability of failure, and use that sort of that process to sort of allocate funding. So over the entire network, you do have some consistency in terms of performance, and we're not likely to have catastrophic failures.
Yeah. And I'll just close by saying, it's unbelievable. I mean, you exceed, in 90% of your performance measures what your benchmarks were. So, what can I say? And thank you. And you need to introduce Marcia. We haven't heard you. I just want to introduce you. We have you here.
This is Marcia Patrick, and she knows more about the department than I do. She's been here quite a while, and functioned as acting director for on several occasions, and she was instrumental in putting a lot of the budget together, and with many of the other environmental components that we work on.
Thank you
You
so
want to
much.
say something?
No, thank you.
Thanks, Marcia. Questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Alderman Finlayson.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, and Ms. Patrick. It was, I believe, Mrs. Patrick's model of a presentation that we used a number of years ago, because it clearly outlined what is accomplished by the department. And we see it again today in your report. And that's what really rings home for us, because we can see how many roads we've paved and how many sidewalks we've replaced or installed, and how many those are the things that people need to hear. Most folks have no idea how completely encompassing public works is.
Right.
You have, 7 different divisions within your department, and they all have very different jobs, really. But all put together is what keeps our city clean and healthy in any number of ways. So thank you, and thank you for sharing, helping to open everyone's eyes, and particularly the folks who are at home listening, of all the things you do in public works. And not only do you do them, but you do it well.
Thank you.
As the chair just said, you make your benchmarks almost 100%. And, we've had any number of hiccups in the last 2 years with weather events and the pandemic and just life. But we're still meeting your benchmarks. So you are to be commended for your leadership and for being here with us in the city. I'll just leave it there. Several questions actually. Skipper Lane.
Okay.
Is, and I'm not sure whether it's in the CIP or not. You mentioned how the roads can be surfaced differently. They will have a life expectancy of not 20 years, but I think you said 10 years. So as we're adding new roads and repairing old ones, are you then determining whether it's the 10-year life expectancy or the 20-year life expectancy? And is that based on the projected usage of the road?
Yes, the decision to utilize either full depth paving or micro paving is based on the in situ condition of the road. I'll sort of give an analogy that would sort of clarify why we do it and why it works. If you take your car, we do it every day with our vehicle. With your car, you undergo periodic oil changes, tire replacements, fluids, checks and things of that nature. You don't actually run the car, most people, until the warning lights come on or bad things happen to it.
My brother does like that, but no one else in the world, hopefully.
Right. So by doing that, you extend the life of your car, as long as you can, right? As long as you wish to have it. So the approach that we take with the roads, this approach with the micropaving, is that we would pick roads that are really not in terrible condition. They might have, the remaining service life would be fairly significant. And what you're doing is you're extending that even further. So if the effect network-wide through all our roads, if we looked at them in total, is that you will end up with lower network costs than if we did a mill and repave. Because mill and repave is very pricey. Of course, that's the traditional way of doing it. we budget about $3 million a year to do that, and that's great that the city can do that and does that. But it really is the cost per mile is significant. You notice that we project we do about 5 miles for $3 million, so you could figure out that could see it's quite expensive per mile to do it. And, it's sort of, if you looked at the entire network, you find that the cost of maintaining the network is higher than if you mix PM with, actual roads that need rail work to be redone on them. I mean, when I say rail work, milling and repaving in that way. So the micropaving is actually a tried and true and tested protocols used widely. If you look at Georgia Avenue, I think I forget which county it's in, but Georgia Avenue has done a lot of micropaving, like down from DC, that'd be Prince George's County, right? They've done a lot of micropaving on that, and it's holding up very well. And it has millions of vehicles that use that road. It's quite strong, and it's a way in which, as part of the pavement management strategy that the city adopts, that you can stretch your scarce municipal dollars and sort of extend the life of your network. So it's sort of like a PM activity that keeps your roads going for longer than if you just let them decay to the point where you have to redo the base and so on, which would occur probably in 20, 30 years, something like that.
So that is an industry standard that we should be maintaining no matter what.
I think it is. It's an industry standard. We're not a guinea pig on this one. This is well tested, and it's proven itself as a beneficial technology. And it's appropriate in many places around schools where you have many cut-ins. In my experience, it's probably not good for around schools where the buses are doing a lot of maneuvers, but for most residential streets and even some of our collector streets, it's probably appropriate for use with that. But what the process has followed is that an assessment is done of the network, and you tend to come back with streets and say, listen, we will do streets within a particular intersection or whatever the length of it is. And then based on the cost and how much you want to allocate to that, you're able to sort of identify a micro-paving program, just like we have a mill and overlay program. And you'll find that over time, over a few years, that the cost of maintaining your streets in good order is lower than if you just did milling and repaving. It's counterintuitive, but it's true.
I'm very familiar with Georgia Avenue, and I don't recall there being
any issues
with it. Right. Now that you mention that, but so a good example to remember. Thank you. My other question has to do with the brine and snow removal. My dad lives in Milwaukee. I'm there a lot. And their roads are always clear. I mean, the main roads, of course. My dad's property backs up to the interstate, and he's one block off. And no matter whether it's 2 inches of snow, which for them is a dusting, or whether it's 2 feet of snow, the roads are clear. And I think I mentioned it to Mr. Gerald when he was our director. Why can't we treat our roads the same way that Wisconsin and other, more northern states treat theirs? And I understood that it's a cost difference. So is this new process now kind of a midpoint between whatever liquid they use? Because the roads always have a sheen on them also. So is this a step closer to the type of snow removal or type of preparation for our roads that they use out in the Midwest?
I think it will be, because what tends to happen when you don't brine or pre-treat is that if the road temperature is very cold, suppose the road temperature is freezing, is below freezing, even if rain fell on it, even if it rained, you will find that precipitation will freeze and bond mechanically to the deck, to the road. Now, once that has occurred, it is very difficult to separate them the plows, we don't use ice cutter blades in every part of the street, and sometimes we don't use them because they can hit like raised manholes, and you can damage the plow supports. You can sometimes hurt the operator, or if we have brick sidewalks, brick roads, we can't use them, they'll destroy the brick. So we use a rubber edge blade. So that tends to float over obstructions, right? As opposed to the steel edge, which will cut, which is ice cutter, which will cut it. So you don't really need, if you're pre-treating, you don't then need the ice cutter blades. Your rubber blades can then push, because there will be a layer of liquid, of salty liquid, is brine, that separates the road from the snow. So it becomes easy for the plows to push it off. And that sheen that you're seeing is really just brine. That's what I would suspect it is. It's sort of a salty liquid. It has a much lower freezing point than regular water because it's been adulterated by the salt. And the benefit of that is that it doesn't freeze, at the normal temperatures. And it allows the roads to be cleared once the operation is being done in a way that you have continuous pushing. So you will clear the cartway and sort of have a much better passageway. And this is particularly a problem like on some of the streets. I know that this last winter, there were some streets that our garbage trucks could not get down because it had iced up before the plows could get to it. And that should alleviate that once you pre-treat, right? So you work with a good weather system. You know that the storm is coming in, what type of storm it is, and then you pre-treat a few days ahead of time, depending on the number of spreaders that you have, a day or two ahead of time, and it works pretty well. That's what the interstates use. Sometimes you see like those white lines, right? Those sort of white lines, and that's the brine that they're using to pre-treat.
So the cost of this, and I think it's in the mayor's budget, is $70,000.
It's $70,000 for the automatic production system. It's really just a matter of loading the salt and pushing a few buttons, knowing how to do. Years ago, I'll just give a war story. Years ago, before it was automated, you had to have a hygrometer which measured the exact concentration of salt. And sometimes the operators would make mistakes and they would spray brine. It was not brine. They'd end up icing the roads completely. So the city manager would go ballistic. So they kind of were very scared to use that. But today, that problem is gone. It's run through a programmable logic controller, which is like a computer brain that sort of tests and determines the correct concentration. It will mix it until it has the right concentration. Then it will load the tanks with it. So it's perfect every time. So you're just really putting salt in, pressing the appropriate buttons, and starting the operation, and you produce thousands and thousands of gallons of brine that can be used.
Well, good to know, good to know. We're in good hands. Replacement of sewer lines. Are we proactive or reactive?
We are proactive with that. We are proactive. So there is a program in place to replace lines based on the asset management approach that I mentioned that City Manager Gerald was instrumental in developing, and the department has maintained that and uses that to make an assessment of pieces of assets that are likely to fail, and more importantly, what would be the consequence if you have a major trunk line that is taking sewage from many neighborhoods that has a greater consequence of failure than a lateral coming from my house. As inconvenient as it might be for me, you're inconveniencing a larger number of people if a trunk line. So using that approach, we have a program where these replacements are done in an organized way that sort of produces overall benefits for the network. So you can see that in everything we're doing, our roads, the water system, the sewer system, we're looking at it on a network basis, which is the entire connection in the city, not just worst first, like this one is old or this one, because we have pipes that are more than 100 years old that are functioning quite well, that they or may not be in need of replacement. It's not the fact that it's old, but based on the material it's made from when it was installed and things like that.
I remember many years ago, our Public Works Director put on each of our desks a cross-section of a pipe that was taken, and it told us a story without words. So the inspecting that you do, not just for sewer, but water, all of our pipes, those inspections are critically important, so that we can remain proactive as opposed to reactive.
Yes.
How is the fleet maintenance working out? You know, we put everything, for those who don't know, we put everything under one department in Public Works for all of our fleet, no matter what department. So how is that working out?
I think that's working excellently. The fleet manager is outstanding. It does an excellent job. And by having one entity responsible for the entire fleet, you ensure that there's some consistency with how the fleet is replaced, maintained, as well as the qualifications of the technicians that we hire, the mechanics that we hire, and the oversight of them is, sort of like done in a way that is consistent, as opposed to if you had 2 or 3 different types of standards that could exist. That could happen if you bifurcated it. So I think that centralizing it has worked excellently.
I was surprised to see I think it was the life expectancy of some of our police vehicles.
The 7.15 or something like that?
Maybe it's page 16. It looked
I'm sorry.
fewer years. Age of fleet, page 16. No, 16.
16, okay. Yes.
We purchased many new police vehicles in the last few years. That was part of the negotiated agreement that we would increase our fleet for them. So are these just average numbers?
I believe they're averages.
Because some of our police vehicles should have a longer life expectancy.
I believe that's based on a national standard that our fleet manager follows. Okay,
so we should be evaluating our fleet according to these standards.
Well, we are, and we're close. So, the national standard would be to not have any vehicles more than 7 years old, and ours are 7.5 years old. So, we're very close.
Okay, thank you. Traffic engineer. No, before I go to that, road calls. I was surprised at the number of road calls that our fleet requires. What are road calls? I think I know what they are, but maybe not.
For instance, one of the cars I use is a hybrid, and I did not realize that if you did not drive for a few weeks, that the battery dies. So I went out to get into the car, and it was dead. So I would call over to fleet and say, Unit 4415 is dead. Can you? And that's a road call. So they would send someone out to jump the car or replace the battery, whatever they do. And
so that's what I thought it was.
That's a road call, right.
So does that speak to the age of our fleet again? If you have 240, 250?
Well, that was the benchmark.
No more than 250, which sounds like a lot.
It sounds like a lot, but we only had 55 as of March. So I think that we're well below what the benchmark is. So 250, and our fleet is I think 319, I believe, units. And I could have that number wrong, but it's a significant number of units. And for fleets that are using, like the DPW trucks are running continuously, fire is running continuously, police units are running continuously. 250 road calls, again, as Marcia mentioned, is like a standard for a fleet of our size. And that's really not a large number of calls for units that are running continuously. So we are well below that, and that's a test. That's a testament.
55 is 55, where we are.
Right, 50 as of March, 55 is where we are. And that's testimonial to the quality of the work that the fleet manager does.
That's very comforting, because I was thinking 250, that's almost every vehicle breaking down one time. Traffic engineer.
Right.
And I asked this question of each director who has a position and can't fill it. What are the obstacles or the barriers to us filling that position?
Any ideas?
Well, the position was removed from our budget, and this is to bring in an independent contractor or for outsourcing of some type, because we no longer have the position. And so what we have now is someone who is an employee of a consulting firm who comes in part of 1 day a week and handles, we had a lot of traffic complaints. A lot of people want a crosswalk wherever they cross the street. And, we look at every single one of our complaints and, or, with all of this road work going on, the best way to detour traffic or whatever. And this is to add some funding so that we can have someone working 20 hours per week.
No, also, Alderwoman, I think that for a while, the department had been trying to fill this position, but it proved challenging, I think, largely because a lot of the people who would be really good for the position probably are employed by the county governments, and they often did not find this to be an attractive relocation or something like that.
So what do we need to do to make it attractive?
Well, I don't know. I know it's maybe not something that can be addressed in maybe this thing, but I think though that that one of the impediments probably is the amount of time that it takes to vest in the system. And that could be, depending on where a person is in their career, that could be something that they may not wish to devote 10 years or may not have 10 years in their plan to sort of vest, particularly if they were not in the state retirement system before. But that's not something that we can do much about in terms of that. I don't think that the pay is really the issue. It's really just you really want someone with strong municipal background, And this consultant who's working with us worked previously for SHA. So he had a lot of this sort of experience. But many of these staff are employed by the county governments, and they may have, bigger type of responsibilities than they would in a smaller municipality. It might just be something that we struggle to fill. And maybe what we did then was to move to the consultant model, because that was the way that we were able to resolve it. Because, we had one engineer who did an excellent job working on it, but really she had a lot more on her plate with the flood control projects and several other major capital projects. Is not really able to do that any longer. So I think it's a mixture of those things.
We just need to know if we should be doing something differently to support you in those efforts. So
I think for the future, it's looking like hiring a consultant for these sorts of positions with a predetermined number of hours. It might be the solution, and might be actually cheaper than hiring a full-time person for this.
Thank you. I appreciate the education initiative to get everyone trained in their respective areas, specifically as it relates to the career ladder. So I want to thank you for that. And lastly, the only thing that is not funded on page 30 is the environmental sensors, BG&E environmental sensors, right?
Yes.
So everything else that you've put in your presentation, all of your enhancements are included in the mayor's budget.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes, thank you very much. Very informative.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of questions. I want to go back really quickly to this slide that's up and the traffic engineer. So the 2,700 is for a limited, 27,000 is for the independent contractor, basically limited hours.
Yes.
Okay. And then in our budget book on 89, we have under positions, there's a traffic engineer that looks like it was funded in 2022. Is the 27,000 in addition to that person's role?
Yes, it is.
Is that position funded?
I'm thinking it might be a mislabeling.
So we removed the funding in '23 for that position.
Yeah.
And I think the total that we have in contractual services, and I'll verify, I think it's like 53,000 for that work. So in the '22 budget, we originally had the position funded, but then we had an amendment at the last minute that removed that funding. I'll have to look at what it's for. I don't recall, but I know we moved it. But when you look at the staffing summary, I think it goes 1 to 0, right?
No, it's 1-to-1.
1 to 1. So let me verify, but I think what we did was they have the position, we just didn't fund it.
Okay.
So I'll check, I'll confirm.
So the 27,000 would just be for that independent contractor, limited hours or a set number of hours?
Yeah, but that's an enhancement to what we already have in the budget, which is 23. So the total is like 50-some thousand.
Okay.
Does the staff total change?
No.
No, it's Lisa right now.
That's
Okay.
okay.
All right. I'm just concerned with it because of, not concerned, concerned is probably too harsh of a word. A lot of the projects that are going on in my ward would benefit greatly from a traffic engineer. And I'm sure that going throughout the city would benefit greatly. So I think it's an important position that either an independent contractor where we can get some hours in there on some of these projects and or get the position refunded going forward if we can fill it, I think would be helpful when we start talking about, those crosswalks and speed zones and sidewalks and no parking on one side of streets and things like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there again, that I think it's really important, and if we can find ways to keep that position in there would be great. I had a question about church circle lights, and I know that we've just replaced them. Is that correct? Or in
We
the
haven't
process of-
replaced them. They're in the process of getting ready to be bid. Sorry, what question did you have on that?
A couple of people have reached out to me in the last couple of weeks that it seems like the lights are flashing on Sundays. Has that always been, or is that something new, or it's always been?
At certain times, like overnight, every night.
Sorry. Yeah, that's always been the case. So overnight they flash. Typically on weekdays they go on full operation about 8 o'clock, I think, 8:30. But then on weekends it extended longer into the day. But then they go on full operation. So that's all planned.
Okay. It was just a couple of constituents asking about them. I figured I would ask the experts. My last question revolves around the street sweepers. And I know that there's always been, at least in my neighborhood and in some of the areas that I've been talking with, a wish for some kind of a posted schedule, like is our neighborhood the, first 5 days of the month, last 5 days of the month, so that people could have the opportunity to move cars so that it was more effective. Is that something that could be considered?
Yes, it is. In fact, we do have a schedule on the website, right? Isn't there a schedule on the website that shows that? I believe there is.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, we don't do curb to curb right now because that's an entire program that we've been for years trying to get established, because you have to remove parking for certain periods of time. And that's some of the problem is the parking issue. I think West Annapolis would be a great place to start because I think there is probably more parking there than, for example, Eastport. But that is one of our goals, and so that's part of the reason we've requested these new positions to be funded out of the watershed fund, is so that that can get established, because you would have things like, education, right? And you need to pick days that, around the city for certain areas, like, 7 to 9 a.m. on the first Tuesday of the month or whatever, where you would, have to have people relocate their cars. so that you could do the curb to curb.
And we currently have a work group that is looking at alternate side parking for the purpose of sweeping. And some of the initial candidates that were sort of thought of really have problems that we can't really, one, the restrictions is that we cannot sweep curbs that roads that do not have curbs. If the road is not curbed, if it's an open section road, we really cannot sweep it, because when the sweepers come through, what it really is sweeping is the gutter line. So you need to have a defined gutter, which is where the junction of the road to the actual face of the curb, that's the gutter face, and that is what is swept. So we are looking at the streets, and the work group has just started, has had like one meeting or two meetings, a couple meetings, and one of the work items that we're looking at is to sort of segregate our streets into those that are curbed and those that are open section. And then following that, we would then sort of look at the other challenges that would be associated with implementing such a program. One of the challenges that Annapolis has with sweeping is that cars do not move. I'll give a street like Green Street down here, just around the corner. The cars never move. So what the operations guys do is they'll come with the blowers, and they'll try to blow the debris from the, but that's very labor intensive, and we have too many miles of streets for that to be efficient. For us to sweep, we really need to have an alternate side program, but we also have to take into account that there often is no place to park, and you have to sort of work it out. It requires some thought and some planning to sort of implement a proper program. It's not as simple as just telling people where would they move to? If you can't actually say, well, the sweep will be here at 9 o'clock in the morning. It will be a window whereby it will come, and where would they move their vehicles to? So that has to be sort of worked out, and we're sort of working on that currently.
Okay. I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
May I just dovetail on that? I know that Truxton Heights, for example, was going to be a pilot on the street sweeping program, and they thought it would be a twofold solution to address some of their car issues, so it would force some cars to actually move. But from what you just said, that it's not productive without curbs.
Without curbs,
then
right.
I don't think it's applicable to Truxton Heights.
That's one of the problems. When we took a look at it, initially, first look at it, some of the streets are curbed, like
Yeah.
On the lower end have curbs, but the roads leading down are open section.
Yeah.
And those can't be swept. Those are not really possible
So-
to sweep.
So I think I'll break the news to them. Okay.
So the work groups will come back with a recommended areas for launching the pilot with something like this that is a very big change, a sort of a major change in the city. It has to be done on a pilot basis so you can work out the kinks, you can work out the communication issues, ameliorate any concerns that residents have. You don't really want to make the program too big to start with. Once you have a successful pilot, that would be the time at which you would then roll it out in the appropriate, for the streets that it's appropriate to use it on. And, it's going to take some work to
Can I
figure that
nominate
out.
Emerald Heights for the pilot?
Admiral Heights?
I'll fight you for
We
it.
can look at it.
Thank you.
Madam
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
sorry. Traffic engineer, in FY '23, we've got $50,000 budgeted in contractual services. I think what DPW has found that there was some difficulty filling that position from a civil service side, more luck and better outcomes from a contractual standpoint. So we put in turnover for that position in the '23 budget.
So I'm confused on the staff count. Your staff didn't change, and there's a line item, traffic engineer, as of, I guess, an FTE. Are you maybe I was thinking maybe you're mislabeling Lisa Greco or something.
Yeah, that should, I think that's,
right.
that shouldn't.
So there's what I think may happen is the position is still a position. There is zero funding allocated to the position.
Okay, all righty. Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to pursue the two last sets of questions from the Finance Committee. First of all, on the street sweeping, it does not make sense to me to sweep the middle of the street, particularly when we allow all the yard mowers to blow all the yard waste into the curb, and then it goes down to the gutter and into the bay. So big cities like DC manage to have no parking Thursday, X number day of the month. And I think we need to bite the bullet and really do that. Otherwise, we're big polluter just flushing all that guck into the bay. So I think we need to, and if you need legislative help, I'll sign up for that, because I think that's a must-do for the environment, but also why waste the time on the street sweeper if you're not really sweeping the guck? In terms of the traffic engineer, I really think we have to, whatever it is we need to do, Ward 8 has even offered to do a GoFundMe to get the money. We are running into traffic problems just like all the rest of the wards all the time. And I remember when we had Lily Openshaw, and we really, on staff, and we really could get, and she is now on some of our committees, and we talk about it all the time. But I think that next to gunfire, I think that traffic and potholes and all of these traffic engineering problems are problems, and it's problems we hear about day in and day out. So I may actually offer a budget amendment. Maybe I can get some support that we, well, you know, we have to be up here, and we have to answer to a higher call. I did want to let our wonderful Katie has added to our wonderful OpenGov a new item, DPW General Fund, where it totals all of these different components together. I've been even more greedy and said, let's total across all funds. But if you look at the very bottom of OpenGov now, you'll see totals for. I also want to join the Finance Committee in commending this presentation in showing us not only what your benchmarks are, but how you did. And let me tell you how I think it benefits you from me, which is, you know, I'm glad to see you exceeding goals where you do, but I worry for you when I see you didn't meet your goals. Now, part of it you've explained, COVID and other things that get in the way, but we want you to meet your goals. And when you can't, and we can do something about it, that is your way to convey that message to us. So I super appreciate the presentation that you put together for us and showing us both what you're shooting for, but how you did. So I want to thank you for that. Quick off-budget question, how are we doing on getting the Hudson Street building put in place?
It's moving along on schedule. It's the vertical components of the site is completed. The vertical components are being erected. I think the salt barn is up. The foundation for the main buildings is completed, and we're on track. That project is running very smoothly, and there are no major issues with it.
So when will we be moving in?
It's scheduled to be completed in spring of next year.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. I know everybody will be happy when that's accomplished.
That's our thing.
Going to slide, offline, I want to ask you more about the red curbs to signage. I think that's a very big issue. We've got hockey pucks, hockey sticks, and red curbs, and yellow curbs, and loading zones, and a whole bunch of confusion. And sometimes we have both hockey sticks and red lines and signs. So I think getting that straightened out. But is that something where you'll be promulgating a policy about moving to signage from red curves.
That's the intent, yes, to move to that. It will turn out to be less labor intensive and more effective in terms of enforcement.
Yeah, and I know city manager and I have been hearing from former Chief Stokes about signage needed where people are driving up on the sidewalk on Bay Ridge to get to the turn onto Tyler.
Okay.
And so I think we may need to take some of the former blockades that were on Main Street for restaurants and actually put them in the streets, but at a minimum signs so that people know. One of my constituents didn't see the signage for a handicap space, so last night they had to pay $175 to get their car out of parking, plus a $500 ticket.
Wow.
So I think signage to keep people from having those kinds of things happen is a great idea. On slide 9, the cyclists, I think, are a really big worry. We have a lot of bicycle lanes that I call suicide lanes in Ward 8, and I think it's around the city, where the lane goes on where Bay Ridge meets Fairview Avenue.
Okay.
The lane is there, and then all of a sudden a curb juts out, and you have to swerve out into what is usually a considerable amount of traffic. I know we have a very good bicycle lane plan, and I know this is an issue that is important to the mayor and to a lot of our citizens, and is an alternative to vehicular traffic. But I'd like to see a lot more money and effort going into reviving the cycle lane plan and making it so it's actually safe for cyclists to ride in the streets. It's really happening throughout the rest of the world. District of Columbia has fabulous bicycle lanes now. I mean, and I think we can do it, we just need to put an emphasis there. And again, if that's something that is a budget requirement where we need more help in the budget, I'm pretty sure I can get the support of a majority of the council and certainly the mayor on looking at the bicycle lanes. That will, in DC, it's very interesting how that interleaves with street parking. By the way, the solution for the sweepers is we add to 0922 removing on-street parking as well as off-street, and then the lanes will be open for the street sweepers. But seriously, getting all of that sorted out. So parking is another big issue, and parking sometimes gets in the way of the bicycle lane. So it is a very big planning kind of issue, and I know you have all of the urgencies of the moment, and so somehow that, and we have a wonderful sidewalk plan for the city too, primary, secondary, tertiary sidewalks, and they interleave both of these, cycling and sidewalks, with our wonderful trail plan for the city. But we always are scrambling to get the day-to-day things done, and we don't really get to those things, which I think are true amenities to the quality of life in the city. And I know it's asking a lot of your staff because you have a lot of things to do, and as does all of our other staff, but those big three, the sidewalks, the trails, and the cycling, I think go together, and I think they marry well with traffic analysis, so I really see them all in the same nugget.
Okay.
I have a question about areas of the city. I have one in particular in Eastport that are not part of our plan for redoing gas lines, redoing water lines, and I'm afraid paying attention to them for flood mitigation. And I'm thinking of the area by Wild Thing and the Maritime Museum down off of 2nd Street, where every time we have a high tide, they get flood they get flood backing up through the the storm drain, and they keep asking me, and why aren't they part of the gas plan? Why aren't they part of the water plan? I don't have an answer to that, but I think for managing stormwater management, if we allow it to come in anywhere, it's going to come in everywhere, and that is a place that gets a lot of flooding. So I think I actually have hit them all, other than to thank you for your presentation, thank you for the work you do, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman.
And thank you for all of the changes in process that we came through with dealing with Parkside Preserve. I think we really have super moved the ball forward on that. That whole new time stamp photographs, all of those processes. I don't think you get enough thank yous or appreciation for that, but that was really a job well done.
Thank you.
Alderman Gay, do you have a question?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Page 29 on the slides, the 3 utility body trucks and 1 pickup truck that will be electric, that's funded by grant. Could you just go into a little more detail about that?
Is your mic on?
Yes, it is.
Get closer.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Much better.
The 3 utility body trucks and 1 pickup truck and replacement SUV, can you just, it's grant funded, but can you explain a little more about what you plan to purchase?
It's not grant funded, and only the SUV is electric vehicle. The others are non-electric because the technology isn't there for that type of vehicle at this time. And the utility body trucks would be the ones you see, with the boxes and whatever that are driven by the crews, and a pickup truck would be a supervisor, and SUV would also be another supervisor.
Okay, so it's not grant, I thought it was, so it's coming out of the,
Watershed restoration.
No, it's out of the water fund, sorry.
water fund, which page is that? Oh, I see.
It was on page 29 shown, but this is part of the fleet replacement.
Okay, so it's coming out of the fund on page 24, okay. Have you looked into the possibility of the, because you said only the SUV is electric, there aren't any utility body trucks that are electric or pickup trucks? I mean, I see electric pickup trucks all the time.
From our fleet manager, I think there might have, let me see, I have to look.
I think even like Ford now. And all that.
Okay, so there was one option for a pickup truck. I'd have to defer to Katie about exactly what was funded. The replacement cost for a pickup truck, a normal one is $27,000 and the EV is $55,000. Which was funded?
That's correct. So we've got 2 EV vehicles out of the water fund. The Escape, the hybrid Escape, and then the pickup truck.
So
The utility body trucks, which I believe are the heavier ones, like the 250s and the 350s, I don't believe they have EV versions of those yet. So it's not, go
you
ahead.
couldn't, because the fund, it looks to me like it has $7 million in it, if I'm not mistaken. The water fund budget? Or, but it also has a minus, which says revenue less expenses, so I'll need some explanation on that as well.
The total appropriation in the water fund is 9.9 million.
Okay, now yeah. So really quick, before I get back to the vehicles, when it has revenue less expenses on
Fund
it.
balance.
I'm sorry?
Fund balance.
Oh, okay. So I should never look at that because I'm
Opened up
always
just shows
like,
it weird. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. And we've relayed that to them to show it better. Go ahead.
So can you not find another 25,000 in the 9.9 to get the fully electric vehicles instead of, because hybrid vehicles are sufficient, but it's not fully electric.
So I'm reading here. It says Escape hybrid, but so there's 2 electric vehicles. The SUV, it has Escape hybrid on this chart, but we're making it electric vehicle.
Okay.
So there's 2 electric vehicles: the Escape, the SUV, and the pickup truck.
Perfect.
Everything that we could purchase electric vehicles is, we've funded that.
Awesome. That's so great to hear. I was happy to see that too. I thought it was grant funded, but I'm excited that we're even putting the money behind it. That's good. Is $100 per employee for all divisions as a part of a career ladder initiative sufficient?
Well, it's a start. The plan, Alderman, is that as we roll the program out and get our sea legs with it, that figure would sort of right size itself. But at this point, we felt that would be sufficient to begin to provide training for the staff. This career ladder is a long-term plan. It's not like 1 year or 5 years. It's hopefully a 20-year plan. So, we won't train everyone all at once. We won't be able to train everyone all at once. But $100 does buy through like the T-squared program. You can buy a fair amount of which is run through University of Maryland for like the vocational side of training. You can buy a fair amount of stuff with that, as well as, if you had to bring in specialists to train on different types of equipment. So it gets us going in a way that we hitherto have not been able to do.
So when I look at your chart, the structural chart on page 2, let's just say I'll pick utilities.
Yes.
And then let me go to utilities and see here. Or I'll actually even do solid waste. If I'm in solid waste and I am the equipment operator 2, but I really, really want to advance and be maybe in, I don't know, water treatment plant one day, but make it to, I just want to make sure I have the right positions. I don't know, the superintendent even. How can I do that? How will the city assist me in doing that? Will that $100 in the program that you're referencing allow me to, get on the right career track, not within 20 years, but something more reasonable so that I can be able to provide for, or to be able to apply for the role even here or at another place, but to be able to assist my family? Like, how can I get up the ranks?
Yes, just let me explain. Yes, I think it will. It's not the final amount that will be allocated each year. It may change. It very likely will change. But if I could just explain what the process is quickly. Yeah. Madam Chair, do you have time for me to do that?
Since you're speaking of time, I just want everyone to be aware that we do have a second presentation that will take about 20 minutes, and to allow for questions, et cetera. I think we should probably end the discussion on DPW around 12:15 if possible, just to keep everybody in that parameter.
Okay, so yeah, I'll go quickly. So if I could just explain what we did. What we did is that we took a look at every division. Say if you looked at say you picked utilities. Now, utilities has some historical titles in there that are somewhat dated and don't really necessarily apply to the work that the current staff are doing. So what we did is we started looking at levels and what we call blocks and levels. And within each block and level, there's seniority that is sort of built in, so that a person coming in as an entry-level person in utilities, we went through the exercise of determining what skills should that person attain before they're eligible to sort of move to the next level, to be this, the second level, the second tier level. And then we did the same exercise, repeated it for the second tier level, the third tier level, and then with various levels of seniority. So at the end of the exercise, what we had built out for every division was a skills package, a skills matrix, that the supervisors as well as line staff, because they were the folks who participated in the committee, agreed that these were the skills that you should attain to be able to be ready for the next opportunity. And we introduced also a more controversial idea, if you will, or a creative idea, in that the argument for every position to be competitive is an old idea that it came out of the military, where public works did come out of the military structure. But it does not really apply as much to the type of workforce that we have today, where we have many, we have traditionalists, some of them baby boomers, Gen Zers, Gen Xers. Each person, each of those cohorts, even though everyone sees them as employees, they tend to look at the world in different ways. They don't look at the world, for instance, the way you look at the world, being younger than me is different from me. Equally valid, but not the same, right? So we have to account for that in terms of in the workforce. So one of the improvements that we're also suggesting is that we move to a skill-based basis. One of the impediments that we have currently is that we have in our organization chart, we have a fixed number of positions. In other words, if you are coming as a maintenance worker 1, we may have, say, 2 maintenance worker 1s and 1 maintenance worker 2. Well, if you're in the maintenance worker 2 position and you're doing a good job and you're healthy and so on like that, how does the maintenance worker 1 ever, how would they ever climb up? I mean, theoretically, but in reality,
They're stuck, yeah.
right, you're stuck, exactly. So one way to unjam that, to fix that, is to remove that sort of competition for the positions and make it a skill-based organization. So the argument is that if you attain those skills, there's no reason for me to not be able to say, well, listen, you are no longer a maintenance worker 1. You have demonstrated that you have attained the skills to be a maintenance worker 2. Right? And the same for the maintenance worker 2, you can be an EO or whatever the appropriate title is above. So it is up to you. It's not a mandatory, it's not a directive coming from the director's office, but it is, it's your career, and you would determine exactly how far you wish to go. Some people may never wish to be superintendent or to be a supervisor. They really just don't want to do that. They just want to be technical and do their job, and they're excellent at doing that, and that's what they're comfortable doing. That's fine. Some other people who want to go to the superintendent's level, they would then choose different training opportunities that would allow them to be ready for that opportunity here or somewhere else. So that basically, in a nutshell, is how it would work. So what you would find is that for each skill package, each skill cluster, there are trainings that some of which are offered in-house, some of which are you would send or bring in people, you would send them out for training or bring in specialists to train them, however it's determined. And then once you've attained that and the supervisors can attest that you have this skill, you just would advance yourself. Right? In other words, it's up to you to do that.
That's great. That's great. And I appreciate that you took the time even to just come up with something new so that it's not stuck in the competitive and I have to wait 15 years for the guy to retire and then, so that's great. And I hope other departments, I've been asking the same question of other departments as well, just to create more opportunities for people within our city who, want to work for the city, who, live here. And I think that's important, especially for the young people, because we really don't, if this is one of our anchor employers, the city of Annapolis. We employ, I think, like 600-700 people. That's, probably third or fourth, maybe to the hospital. I don't know who else is above that. So the Naval Academy does. Yeah, so it'd probably be Naval Academy Hospital, maybe us or something like that. So it's important. It was one other question that I had. As it relates to the traffic engineer that everyone has discussed, is there anyone that you see as that you while you've worked here in the city of Annapolis that you're like, oh, this person could be the traffic engineer. Maybe they just need the training and we could fund it? Is there room for elevation from within, or do we have to go out to find the role?
I would think, Alderman, that we might have to go out. The staff have pretty significant workloads, and there's no person who has the bandwidth, so to speak, to sort of say, well, listen, you will take on this, because that in and of itself is...
Well, like if they leave their other role, if they would feel more comfortable...
Well, not with the amount of work that we have, because they're all busy. The work that is dictated to staff is driven by what's in the CIP. Mm-hmm. So, it would, if we reduce the CIP size and sort of eliminated projects that said, well, listen, you no longer have to work on these, and we would send you, then, that might be, but I don't think that's feasible. We have a lot of work, and they're all legitimate and good projects, needed projects. So I just think that really it's better to use someone who has that experience. It would probably work out better for the
That was
city.
just a quick, because I think everybody kind of hinted on that. The signs instead of the red paint, I think that's great. I have constituents who call all the time about getting red paint replaced. And so I think that's a great goal and would be very helpful. Sign pollution, obviously, even outside of historic district is a problem, but I think it would be sufficient and they would appreciate it,
Okay, Alderman Gay, could we?
That's it. I don't really have any.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I think you should take a lot of credit for this career ladder implementation. I know you brought it up last year and you felt very strongly about it, so thank you very much. Alderwoman Pindle-Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have to preface my questions with something that someone said in your department had asked me a question. And we've talked about, what departments pretty much touch everybody. But this person asked me a question, basically, what department touches every resident or business or visitor? And so the person who asked me the question, I won't say the person's name, but the initials are SB. And I think we all know who that is. But anyway, I asked me one day, what's the most important department in the city government? And I was, the normal answer usually is police and he said, well, what do you do when you get up in the morning? Do you go to the bathroom? Do you turn on the water? I said, I think I know where you're going with this one. So I must say, the first thing that we do in the morning is thank Public Works for being able to get where we need to go. Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank you for that, for being, and your data is extraordinarily compelling. And I guess the one thing that stood out in my mind most, because I do have a lot of constituent requests, is no validated complaints on slide 15. I was overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. Can you explain what that is and why you didn't have any, I guess?
You want to try?
Yes. This is related to solid waste collection. And a validated complaint, we get a lot of complaints, but they have to be validated to be considered a real complaint. So what that means is someone calls in and says, my trash is missed. And it's often not a true miss. And we also don't consider it a miss if they call in the same day and the contractor goes back to collect it, because sometimes a car might be parked. And we have GPS on all the vehicles, so we know they go down every street. We occasionally have residents that didn't put something out. We have a few, sometimes they might put it out late and the truck's already been by and they won't call and say it wasn't collected. But we can look to see if the truck, and we ask the driver. But a validated complaint would be trash, recycling, yard waste, or bulk collection that truly was not collected. I have to say, our solid waste supervisor does an excellent job working with our contractor, who's MBG Enterprises, and they do an amazing job. They're very responsive. They want to do a good job. We're very lucky that we have them as our collector. And that I have to say, that's why we have the 0 complaints.
I remember several years ago, it was a huge, huge, huge problem. Mm-hmm. It was huge.
It was a different really collector.
Bad, to the point of almost, I think they would end up having to pay us for all the problems that we had. And I know Mr. Gerald was well aware of that, because he heard me on numerous times the problems that it was really, really bad. And I want to just share one story with you all that I thought was poignant. This was several years ago. And I had a resident who called me on a Friday afternoon and said that his trash was not picked up. This was before you got here, Mr. Johnson. And he was concerned because his wife, and I'm going to make this delicate, was elderly and used Depends. And he was concerned that if the trash was not picked up, that the trash would be littered all over the street and it would be an embarrassment. And you all came out and took care of that. And for him, that was huge. And that's just a small snippet of what we see from our Public Works Department. I thought that was a Friday afternoon, it was about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and it was done. And I thought that's truly the measure of a department, when you can take that and realize the significance and the secrecy of people and what they go through every day. So thank you for that. And we've been down the traffic engineer lane, so I won't be, go on with that. And that was basically about contractual versus having a hired person. So we've tried that, it just isn't working.
It didn't work.
And you never know, once you get the contractual person, we may end up moving towards that based on something else that happens in the future. Let's see. Thank you for the Hudson Street update. I try to get back there and poke around and look to see what's going on, but spring of next year sounds great, and we look forward to that addition in Ward 3. And let me look again. I think that might be the end of my questions. Oh, I was gonna ask about the fire hydrants, because I think years ago, fire department did take care of that, because I remember Chief Stokes saying that was the one impediment, that they had to become a Class 1 fire department, and that was taken care of. So it must be now turned over to you all, but thank you so much. We appreciate everything that you do.
Yes, thank you.
When is the opening of the DPW facility?
It's currently scheduled for spring of 2023.
Oh, okay, I had the wrong year.
Right, so we're a few months away, but it's moving along on schedule in terms of this.
Great, thank you. Alderman Gay has.
Yeah, I just had one last one. Is there a schedule that we could possibly obtain that maybe has, for the fleet replacement? Or is that just done on a, case-by-case basis?
You want to talk to that?
I asked just to, so that, for example, like I think what you all did with with this group was perfect. The ones that could be electric, you made them electric, and the ones that couldn't. But how do we track that so we can just follow through and make sure that over the next couple of months and years that that's done the way you all did it in other departments?
Oh, you want to talk about that?
Do you want to speak from a debt standpoint? I will tell you that Danny does have a list that he does maintain. Based on funding, we may or may not be able to fund his requests every year, but we do take a look at it, and we talk to DPW and Fleet extensively on that list. But I'll let Jody speak.
And that's what I was going to say. There's a master list of all of our vehicles, and during the budget process, Danny Horwath comes to us and says, these are the ones I would like to replace. And we've done that as much as possible within the funding that we have available. And some of these separate funds, like water and sewer, we were able to fund more because they have some fund balance in their funds to buy vehicles. The general fund doesn't have as much as, the list is this long. So, but he doesn't understand the desire to buy the electric vehicles, and are trying to pinpoint the vehicles that can be electric when they're replaced.
I would like to meet him. I don't think I have. Is it possible to maybe introduce us via email?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Okay, so will you be joining us on the capital project
I will. Yes.
meeting next week, I believe? Okay.
Madam Chair, I'd like to request a list of all of the projects. I recall, I guess, a couple of years ago, when Mr. Gerald was our Public Works Director, he gave us a list of all the projects. And I think, actually, we put it in the newspaper.
Do you mean the CIP, the capital projects? The construction projects?
Was it all CIP, or?
If it's project, it's gonna,
Yeah, it should be.
yeah,
I
so,
just want a simple list by name.
all right,
We know
so,
the details in the
if you look here in the front pages of the CIP budget, there's a list with names.
Okay, is that comparable to what, Mr. Gerald, you gave us? Because we were quite impressed with all the projects that were going on. And actually, there was a letter to the editor that listed them all. So
We can provide it in Excel if you want the list in Excel. It's
well, actually, I was asking the Public Works Director, do you have it, or I think it came from the Public Works Director.
We create the book, they create the projects, and they develop them, and they give us pages to put in the book, and then we have the master list. I don't know if you keep another list that you have.
I don't. I mean, we would basically use what's in the CIP book.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to make it difficult.
No, we have it. I'm just trying to get what kind of information you want on it besides just the name of the project and the total.
Is the name of the project.
Okay.
Because we can always go to the CIP to get the specifics. That's not what I'm asking for.
But the CIP, the front page is the schedule like this.
That's not
with
that may be in part.
Maybe similar to the one that Director Nash would do, like where they would have the project and then we would have hey, this is just a brief update. She would do it every month in the Excel. Maybe similar to that.
Okay, I don't know, I'm not familiar with, I just want a list. And the purpose is just to show the volume of what you do, okay? Had nothing to do with cost, has nothing to do with workload. And no, I want just this.
Just the project.
If all of that, okay. Okay, sounds great.
Alderman Finlayson.
No, I put it
Yes.
together and I
Jody
will
showed you the
find
23
it
list,
and I
so
will
when I
bring it
provide the
back.
quarterly budget versus actual, I asked for an update from DPW. So that'll tell you what's going on in 22.
Okay, and I really wasn't trying to track where we are in the project or anything like that, because we can find that. I just want a list that the community can see the overwhelming number of things that are going on. That's all I'm asking for.
Yeah, I'll find that list. I know exactly what you're talking about. I'll find it and we'll update it.
Okay, thank you. Not trying to make more work, just trying to share the good news. Thank you.
Would it just, the list is fine, but I was just saying, would it be fair then to say that you are responsible for $168+ million worth of work that's in the capital budget? Is that a fair statement?
Over the period defined, yes.
Okay. For all those who are listening. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll see you again in the capital budget review. We have a gift. Your water, because she's going to throw something at you.
No,
But you're not a good catcher.
Was it?
Ellie, you need to throw it high.
No, it's worse.
Oh, no, now she's got a frisbee.
Frisbee, oh.
Really dangerous.
So I'm not going to embarrass myself.
Let's see it. Can you catch a frisbee?
We'll try. Oh, she has children that are practicing.
You spoke too soon.
Thank you.
But at least it got to the tabletop. I mean,
Yeah, it's okay. It was either that or a beach ball.
Thank you.
Oh, I like the beach ball.
That would have been fun. That'll be next. All right.
I'm out to get you, Kate.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I was aiming for the coffee cup.
I will see.
I might just scoot over.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait for it. You want to sit here? Yeah, you can sit here.
Yeah, I think you have to sit here because I don't think the cord.
Well, I don't. Is it on this computer?
Should be on there.
Oops, what did I do?
That's all right. I'll figure it out.
So, huh?
1/10 of 1%. So 95 plus 1/10 of that.
$950? What are we doing?
I think if I saw it, there we go.
Oh, is that them? Is that-
Revenue.
Uh-oh.
Still looking at our. So this is 1%.
It's bigger, it does millions.
That's all right. Sorry, I thought it said it took it to the trash.
I want to know where this is in the budget. I don't know where this is in the. Do you know?
Director Dickinson, can I ask you a question?
Takia,
Where in the budget book is
is there a way to quickly
the
access
enterprise
this?
fund rate? Can you tell me what page number in the budget?
Oh, the rates?
Yeah.
It's in the enterprise, it's in that section with Public Works, because it's all Public Works. Let me find it.
Thank you.
Maybe in the beginning of Public Works. No, hold on, maybe it's in the
While
front
we
of
have
the book.
time, really quickly. Can I, while we have time, Director Johnson? Would smaller projects still have to go through the review? For example, like a basketball court or something like that? Does that still have to go through a tedious CIP review process, or?
It should, because it's not always as simple. That was part of what happened with the courts, the tennis courts.
Oh, okay,
They
okay.
appear to be simple in terms of scope, but really there could be underlying issues that they need to look at, groundwater, grade, other things like that. So, yes.
Perfect, okay, all right, I appreciate that.
Oh. Katie, where did we put the page of rates, utility rates?
It's in DPW section.
Page 88.
I think I'm missing, I'm missing another page, 88. I don't know what's going on. It's the,
Thank you.
Just me. Hi, thank you for waiting, and take whatever time you need. Apologies for the delay. If you introduce yourself, and you can do your presentation uninterrupted, followed by questions.
Great. Well, good afternoon. My name is Dave Hyder. I'm with Stantec. We've worked with the city for a number of years now looking at rate studies for your enterprise funds. And what I'm going to go over today is an overview of the rate study for 2023. And in particular, our agenda will look at the water fund, we'll look at the stormwater fund, and the refuse fund. And as I go through water and sewer first, I'll go through a little bit more detail, but then it gets a little bit repetitive, so I'll go a little bit quicker. But essentially what these studies do is we help you determine what the appropriate level of revenues or adjustments to revenues should be for fiscal year 23. But we do that by looking out over a 10-year projection period. Because these are long-lived assets, we need to account for the fact that you're going to be maintaining these for a long time. In terms of the financial plan development, there's really 3 steps. The first step is identifying the revenue requirements, and that's essentially what does it cost to provide the specific service. And the way that we do that is we take your fiscal year 23 budget, and then we escalate each of the line item by line item expenditures based upon cost indices, input from staff. So we ultimately get a forecast. Yes.
Would you move closer to your mic or move the mic closer to you? Thank you.
Yes. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So again, we're taking the expenditures and forecasting those forward over a 10-year period. We do this within a financial model. We also have to account for existing debt service. You've issued debt in the past. You need to pay for that, pay the debt service to pay it off. We also need to account for the capital improvement projects that were just discussed. And so with that, we get a 10-year forecast of what does it actually cost to provide each of these services. The next step would then be to do a revenue forecast. So we take your system demands, how much water people are using, how much sewer they're generating, refuse collection, stormwater, things of that sort. And we essentially forecast that forward over a 10-year period and say, what does our revenue look like for each of these utilities, assuming we don't change rates? We then compare the revenues with those expenditures and evaluate, are we able to meet the key metrics for each of the funds? And that would be maintaining a minimum reserve balance within each of the funds. There may be debt service reserve requirements. This is just the overall financial plan development. So now I'll jump into each of the funds. So the first fund is the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund. And just looking at your fiscal year 23 water revenue requirements, it's just a pie chart here that shows the day-to-day operations and maintenance budget. It's about $5.2 million, makes up about 52% of the total revenue requirements for water in fiscal year 23. You've got almost $1.5 million worth of capital projects that are cash funded, so funded from current revenues. And then you have existing debt service that you have to pay for prior projects of about $3.3 million. So that gives you your total water revenue requirements. On the sewer side, revenue requirements are more aligned with, in terms of operating costs, are more significant portion. They're almost 75% of your sewer revenue requirements are for O&M, operations and maintenance of the system. Got about $1.35 million of cash funded capital, and then a little bit less than $900,000 in existing debt service. So that, sure.
I have a question because I don't understand. When you say water revenue requirements, is that actual revenue coming in, or is that the revenue you've already calculated to support the expenses? What threw me was when I saw O&M expenses.
Sure. So it's an industry standard term. It is a little bit confusing. It's really, these are the total expenditures that have been identified for the water fund for fiscal year 23.
So they are expenditures.
These are expenditures.
Expenditures.
Yep. Operating
Okay.
expenditures,
Got it. So
debt service.
Thank you. So
Yep.
terminology
No problem.
issue. Thank you.
Yes. And then so for the total sewer expenditures for fiscal year 23 are shown on slide 6. So the next slide, we look at the water system, and what we're looking at here is what we term a water revenue sufficiency. So when we take those fiscal year 23 expenditures for water, we total them up. Budgeted total is $9.9 million. So you can see the operating cost, your cash funded capital, existing debt, and then so our total water expenditures, $9.9 million. We're then again forecasting forward over a 10-year period. So we forecast your operating expenses, we forecast what's in the capital improvement plan, the payoff of your existing debt, any future debt that we need to issue to fund capital improvement projects. And what this says is that your operating expenses for water in fiscal year 23 are $9.9 million. We're forecasting that by 2032, they'll be about $12.58 million. And then the final line, or the final row in the figure, shows your water revenues. So this is what we're anticipating if you don't change your rates in fiscal year 23. You'd be bringing in about $8.47 million worth of water revenue. If we just assume, okay, no increases in water revenues, we can then look at, are these revenues sufficient to meet our expenditures? And we'll bring this full circle in a moment. But you can see here that water revenues are not sufficient to cover expenditures in any of the fiscal years, and that the gap essentially between the revenues and the expenditures grows over time. We do the same thing on the sewer side.
Go ahead.
We have the sewer revenue sufficiency. So we have the operating costs, the capital cost, brings that full total expenditures for sewer to $8.56 million. You can then see, again, we're forecasting over the projection period to where we're at about $11 million by fiscal year 2032. Again, we compare the current sewer revenues without any adjustments to those expenditures. And what we'll see here is that we're not covering our expenses in the near term, and that gap does grow, but it's not as significant as it is on the water side. So the next step in the process is to say, okay, how are we meeting our metrics based upon that revenue sufficiency. So if we go forward with our expenditures over 10 years, we don't adjust water and sewer rates, this slide shows the results. And so the first at the top of the slide is your unrestricted combined year-ending cash balance. It's a little bit over $20 million is what we're forecasting will be at the end of 2022. And what we're showing is that if you don't adjust rates going forward, because of those losses on an annual basis, we would be gradually eating into that cash balance to where we would exhaust the cash balance by fiscal year 2028. We would come close to our minimum balance. We want to maintain a certain balance that we never want to fall below in terms of the fund. But again, we would be running out of cash essentially by 2028. The slide also shows when we look at the income available for debt service coverage that we would be falling below. We want to try to maintain a 1.5 debt service coverage ratio, and we're falling below that in fiscal year 25. So bottom line, we're showing that over a forecast period, revenues are not sufficient to cover expenditures. And so what we're recommending, and we do look at a 10-year period, but what we're recommending for fiscal year 23 is a 4% increase in water rates and no increase in sewer rates. Going forward, we believe you're going to continue to have to increase rates to keep revenues in line with expenditures. We're forecasting about 4.9% for water over the next couple of years and 3.5% for sewer. What this will allow you to do is essentially fund the operations maintenance expenditures of the system, fund the debt service and capital. But we do forecast, like most utilities, that you're going to continue to have to raise rates to keep revenues in line with expenditures. And the reason we're recommending this plan is essentially you do have sufficient cash today. As I mentioned, you've got about $22 million we're forecasting by the end of fiscal year 22. What we're forecasting is essentially with a gradual rate plan that you would gradually use down your cash balance. So we do anticipate that you would have used some of your fund balance in fiscal year 23 with those recommended rate adjustments, but that over time we would be spending down to the minimum balance that we would want to maintain. So what this looks like in terms of your actual rates are shown here on this slide. So your current rate structure is that you have a water and a sewer fixed charge. That's a charge that's charged quarterly regardless of use, and it scales by meter size. These water fixed charges have been increased by the 4% over the current rates. Sewer fixed charges have not increased because we're recommending the 0% increase. And then on the usage side, when you actually use water, you have for residential customers, the more water you use, you're stepped through tiers, the more expensive it becomes. These rates are all, again, 4% higher than the current. So if you only use from 0 to 7,000 gallons a quarter, you'd pay $4.15 per 1,000 gallons. Once you go into over 7,000, you'd pay $8.31 for that next 1,000 gallons. Non-residential rates are $6.18 for all metered water use. And then sewer rates, again, are not changing. So metered water as it's charged for sewer would be $5.91. So what this looks like in terms of a typical customer, so if an average residential customer uses about 12,000 gallons per quarter, the current combined water and sewer bill on a quarterly basis is about $165. That would go up by $3.22 per quarter in fiscal year 23 with the recommended adjustment. So again, the sewer bill would stay the same. The water bill would go from $80 up to $83. So again, $3 per quarter or $1 a month for your typical residential customer. Then if you do go forward with 4.9 and 3.5% increases in 24 and 25, you can see the resulting bills. So that wraps up water. The next fund is the Sewer Enterprise Fund and stormwater. My apologies. Next is the Stormwater Fund. And similar format, we do the same type process. So the 2023 stormwater expenditures or revenue requirements in total, you can see that about 45% is for operations and maintenance of the stormwater system, which is $1.3 million. You've got 1.5 million of cash funded capital, and then about $100,000 worth of annual debt service, bringing your total expenditures for stormwater. We use the same process on the next slide to look at the current fiscal year 23 expenditures and then forecast that forward over the projection period. What you'll notice is that you have operating expenses going from 1.34 up to 1.8 million. Cash funded capital does bounce around. It's important to note that the street sweeper that was talked about earlier is included in that cash funded capital in fiscal year 23. You do have some existing debt. We are forecasting that you're going to have to borrow for the stormwater fund given the capital investments that are needed. So the total expenditures, again, for fiscal year 23 would be about 3 million for stormwater. You can see how that changes over time. And we do the same analysis where we say, what is our revenues from stormwater fees given no changes? So we're at 1.67 million currently. If we don't change it, you can see there is a gap both in 2023 as well as there's a gap going forward. So we use that same analysis and look at the projected unrestricted year-end cash balance for the stormwater fund, assuming no increases. Currently have a little bit over 2.2 million is where we anticipate you'll be at the end of fiscal year 23. With no stormwater fee adjustments, you would rapidly use up all those funds to where you'd be out of any cash balances by fiscal year 26. You'd fall below the minimum target that we want to maintain in fiscal year 24. And so what we're recommending, given the continual increase in cost associated with the MS4 permit compliance, with the new positions, as well as with the capital, we're recommending and believe that you need to increase stormwater fees by 7% in fiscal year 23. And then we're forecasting that you're going to continue to need to increase them at about 7% for the next 4 years afterwards. And what that essentially would allow you to do would be to maintain a fund balance within the stormwater fund that would be at the minimum going forward. In terms of what the actual stormwater fees look like, you currently charge stormwater on a quarterly basis. If you're a single family parcel, you pay $19.95 currently. With the 7% increase, that would go to $21.35. Multifamily, they pay per unit of $9.98. That would go to $10.68. And then if you're a non-residential parcel, it's based upon your actual impervious surface. And based on that size of impervious surface, you fall into the various tiers as they're shown here. So I do have a comparison, just a stormwater fee comparison from some surrounding jurisdictions, what the quarterly stormwater fees bills are for single-family residential properties. You can see that they do range. DC Water up at the top at $63. City of Baltimore is currently at a little bit less than $20. It is important to note that while I'm showing the proposed City of Annapolis here at $21.35, these other stormwater bills are the current bills. We don't know yet whether other jurisdictions will be increasing their stormwater fees in fiscal year 23. So it is important to keep that in mind. So the final fund is the refuse fund. And did want to set a little bit of background in terms of the refuse fund. As it was mentioned earlier, as Marcia mentioned, the city does contract out the majority of the services provided within the refuse program. And going back a little bit now, in 2019, the city did enter a new multi-year refuse and recycling contract, which did have substantial increases associated with it and had significant financial impacts on the refuse program. And so over the last couple of years, you have been adjusting the refuse fees to increase them up to coming in line with expenditures. But as we'll talk about in a moment, that's going to continue to need to be the case going forward. So the refuse program, operation and maintenance expenditures associated with the contract services is by far the most significant expense. 3.3 million, about 98% of your costs are associated with the operating expenditures. You do have a little bit of existing debt, about $58,000 associated with the refuse program. So again, the same process, taking those operating costs, playing them forward over the 10-year projection period. You can see them going from 3.67 million in fiscal year 23 up to about 4.79 in fiscal year 32. You do have, again, a little bit of existing debt, and then you also have a little bit of cash funded capital, which is primarily associated with fleet. There is a plan to purchase refuse trucks in fiscal year 24 and then again in 29. And so those show up in the cash funded capital. When we total that all up, we see a total refuse expenditures of about 3.74 million in fiscal year 23, going up to about 4.8 by fiscal year 2032. Same analysis when we compare the current revenues generated from refuse fees, you're at about 2.8 million. That is obviously below the current expenditures, both now and into the future. So once again, if we play this forward, you do have fund balance, cash balance within the refuse fund currently. About 2.8 million is where we think it'll be by the end of fiscal year 23. If you don't adjust the refuse fees, you would fall below that minimum target by fiscal year 24 and then be out of cash by fiscal year 25. So given the fact that the refuse programs are currently exceeding the program revenues, we're recommending that we increase the refuse program annual fees by 8% in fiscal year 23. And then we think you'll need to continue to escalate them at about 8% going forward over the next few years. And what that would look like is that would allow you to maintain a minimum balance within the fund, spend it down towards that minimum, but then maintain that over the projection period. We are forecasting that you probably need to do about 5% increases in future years, just given inflation and the increasing cost of providing service. Just wanted to provide a little bit of history in terms of the refuse fee. So this is the annual residential fee. Back in 2015, the fee was $323 per year. The city actually reduced the fee over the subsequent years to where you got it down to $205 in 2018. And then with the new contract and the increase in cost, that has been escalated over the last couple of years. And so the refuse fee for residential property owner would be about $324 per year in fiscal year 23 with the 8% increase. And then finally, just in terms of a comparison of annual refuse fees for single-family residential properties, you can see that Annapolis is towards the bottom in terms of the comparisons. You are below Anne Arundel County. And again, this is not necessarily an apples to apples comparison, is that the fiscal year 23 fee is being compared here with fees that are currently in place for these surrounding jurisdictions. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. This is really important information, especially when for our residents, and thank you so much for the comparisons. That helps a lot. My questions might be more historical, trying to understand. Let me use water for an example. What I assume the existing debt service is caused by initial capital investments. Is that where that came from?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
A big component of it would be the water treatment plant on the water side.
Good example.
Yes.
So I understand the logic. Page 7 is bad, page 11 is good, because we raise rates to accommodate. And what I don't see is the parameter that I don't see the math of what we want to hold as our debt. It looks like the driver of this is what we want to hold for debt service. I don't know what is that a percentage, or that's what you want to remain as constant as possible? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, we're really tying it to two metrics, and I'd say the number one metric is the minimum balance in cash. And so that's what this slide is showing, is saying that right now you have we're forecasting about $22 million worth of unrestricted cash on the system. And so we do have some funds to be able to allow you to gradually increase rates over time. We don't immediately have to raise rates to make sure our revenues and expenditures are immediately aligned. We can use some of that balance going forward. And so that's allowing you to gradually increase rates. And so what we're targeting here is essentially the orange bars gradually over time spending down towards that minimum balance maintained in the fund.
So we can do that with water and sewer. It appears, though, with the stormwater, there's other variables that we can't control, which would be the requirements, MDE requirements, et cetera. My concern is, I'm not sure how else to ask this. Are we going to run out of projects I don't know if that's more of a Director Johnson question, but do you know what I mean? It just seems like...
Yeah, I believe you have sufficient projects. It's been ramping up as I've done this over the last couple of years. We were anticipating these projects coming, and now they're actually happening, and so the expenditures are significant. And so that is putting pressure on the fund in terms of needing to increase the stormwater fee, but also using those balances. But I don't know if the director wants to speak to
I'll just say something
projects.
real quick. Go ahead, come on in. But the other thing, the projects are going to get more expensive because you kind of pick the low-hanging fruit to do first.
Yes.
And then as you continue and have higher and higher MS4 permits, the projects become more expensive. So
Yeah, I think that's what I was... Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking, is that you have limited opportunity to spend it efficiently because you're going to have crappy sites or something. I don't know. And you're more difficult. Thank you so much, Mike. Oh, go ahead, Director John.
Yes, Alderwoman, that's basically correct. The approach the city has taken is that it did a lot of pre-planning to put projects into the pipeline. And then we're now in the phase where we are going to begin to have significant drawdowns as we begin to implement projects. So the stormwater projects are generally expensive, and that is sort of being taken into account in the cash flow that is being modeled here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. I don't think I have any questions on refuse. So, questions? Alderwoman Finlayson? Oh, and let me say 5 minutes for my other colleagues. Like a reminder.
Thank you, Mr. Hyder. Mm-hmm. Our city code says that these funds have to sustain themselves, correct? So right now, we have a surplus, in essence, in all of our funds. Mm-hmm. But you have calculated out for us 10 years, and you have demonstrated that in 10 years, we're not going to be able to sustain, actually sooner than that, but actually right now in the water fund, our expenses outweigh the revenue that we're generating. So we don't have a lot of choices, is what I've gathered. And you have been very clear in your charts to us to show us how much we need to increase our water, refuse, and stormwater. So we can follow your advice, or we cannot, in which case we'll find ourselves in a bad place. Am I reading all of this correctly?
You are, yep.
So, for example, we should be raising our water rate by 4% this year for 23. Yeah. And then, and you've taken us out to year 26 to 4.9% increase. Mm-hmm. So I guess one question is, why did you not go out to 32 just to give us that information? Or will we begin to create a surplus by then?
No, we are, if I go to a particular slide.
I'm on 10 is what I was looking at.
Yeah, so we are assuming to maintain this trajectory where we're not dropping below our minimum balance by 2032. We are assuming that you're going to continually have to do about 4.9% on water and 3.5% every single year going forward over the projection period.
And that will get us to year 32 on the page 11. That'll get us to year 32 even out.
Correct.
Okay.
Where we're spending down. The reality is you do have, you could make a decision to say we're not going to raise rates in the near term, but what that always results in is more significant increases in the future. And based on my experience, that's generally very unfavorable within the public in terms of that rate shock that you experience. So to have a smooth and steady management plan has generally been very effective for the city.
I guess my question, Mr. Gerald, should we be codifying a plan, not just for 1 year, but for 10 years? I mean, can we have it in front of us. So should we be codifying this somewhere in policy, procedure, code, somewhere to say we will do this for the next 10 years?
No, I don't think so. So what we do is you'll recall that we passed the legislation that we can go up to 5% increase each year without the council having to approve it administratively. That's for just water and sewer. But we have Mr. Hyder every single year come back to look and see what has changed. So what really matters is what we're going to do this next year. And then we'll see if anything changes and if he has any different recommendations next year when he does the update. Because I think that's what's valuable is each year you do an update to see what's changed and what the new numbers might be. And it's usually fairly consistent, but it's good to do that every single year to get an update.
So right now, you can increase these fees without us doing anything.
Just the water and sewer,
Yeah.
and just up to 5%. So the other ones will be in the fee tables, the stormwater, and the solid waste. But the water and sewer can be administratively increased up to 5%.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes, I have a quick question. So the increase is then compounded, right? So 5% or 4.9% this year, and then 4.9% on top of that next year. Could we get, because I'm not that quick at math, an analysis of the average? What's that going to look like when we're adding 4% every year? That's one question. And I see on, I'm going to lose my, talking about the non-resident water, is it possible for us to charge a higher percentage on non-resident water than we do on residential? Could we increase that percentage?
Generally, from an industry standpoint, is you want to do it based on cost of service.
Okay.
And so that effectively the non-residential, the fact that they don't go through tiers is aligned with the residential because a residential pays more once they are using the water, you could say, more discretionary. If they're irrigating or washing cars or things like that, it becomes more expensive. Whereas, so generally that would be something we'd want to steer away from unless we have a specific cost basis to say it costs us more to serve non-residential customers than residential.
Okay, thank you. Going to the refuse portion of the slides, and I should have been writing down the slide numbers.
25.
So 25, perhaps, 26. So I know that we signed a new contracts, but it seems like now we're paying more for less service. like, for instance, if I don't have it in a trash can, but I have it tightly tied in a bag, they leave the bag on my front doorstep. Is there any way that we can take a look at those? And maybe that's not your,
Yeah, not my.
you're just looking at the numbers, at the contract.
I can comment to the fact that your prior agreement that you had was exceedingly beneficial, very cheap, I guess. And really, this new contract brought you up to more industry standard in terms of costs. So you had a great contract for a while. And then, not that you don't have a good contract now, but it was basically underpriced is what it looked like. But let the director put the specifics.
Alderwoman, on the issue with the garbage, I don't think that we would consider that to be like a reduction in service. If a person were to containerize the garbage, once it's containerized, it would be collected once it's placed curbside. So there's no change in the service. Really, I guess it's like a public health kind of an issue, because what we found was that the bags were easily broached by foxes and other feral animals, raccoons, buzzards, and they tend to spread it around, and it becomes like a health issue. It's also an MS4 violation, because that would sort of flow into the catch basins when it rains and sort of enrich the waters of the bay and promote algae growth and things of that nature. So our code just requires containerizing of the garbage. It's not really in a way a cost-saving measure. That was not the intent. It was more a health and public health kind of a decision that the code anticipated.
From a public's point of view, it's a very picky. If I have a party this weekend and I have to go out and buy a new trash can next week to put out my trash
Okay.
in order to make it all fall in. Okay, again, constituent questions, talking about it. And then continuing to talk about the refuse, it looks like we can go further into like fiscal year 32, so we can go further down the line before we start drawing off of that. Is it possible that we could recommend a slightly lower percentage, or is that not a recommendation?
Yeah, so what we're showing on slide 26 is that it's actually pretty dire in terms of we're showing you dropping below where we want to be by 2024. So some pretty significant drawdowns. And so our recommendation would be not to delay this fiscal year 23 increase, to evaluate again in fiscal year 24. But there are just expenditures, fuel and things like that are really inflating that. It's putting a lot of pressure on the utilities from that perspective with inflation.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I do appreciate all of the comparisons and us comparing. Often we're compared against the county and what our fees are, and it's nice to see that we're still less, even with our increase.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as always, an excellent presentation. And I appreciate, really, I think, as conservative as we can make it approach to keep ourselves in balance. I would say to my colleagues, if you remember several years ago when we were trying to introduce the stormwater, and in particular in the county, that sensitivity between messing with residential and commercial is very high. I don't think you want to mess with it. That sleeping dogs lie. The one slide that I think either I missed it or isn't here is the one that shows the overall quarterly bill. I was going to get a haircut yesterday because the one thing that my barber, who does have a blade in her hand, always talks to me about is her water bill, which is really the quarterly combined bill. So I think Alderwoman O'Neill is right. This is something that constituents do feel and do pay attention to. But it does feel like we're going to have a pretty big increase in the next total bills when we put these off, when you combine all four. Do we have did I miss it in here, or is there some sense of what the total increase in the bill would be?
We do have it. It's not in the slides. I know I gave it to, it's in the budget. I believe.
We provided that on page 88 of the budget book. There's a little chart in there that they prepared that shows the average increase in the quarterly bill.
Okay, thank you. I will have to definitely get my hair cut tomorrow, so I need to be armed with this.
Bring that comparison sheet with the other jurisdictions. Alderman Gay, do you have any questions?
I really need to sit with Jody to get better explanation on some of the background and the fund workings. But what I just was talking to the alderman about is, to me, this is just bad news, because all you're doing is raising people's bills. I know when I lived with my grandmother, as the alderman mentioned, all she talked about was the water bill. Mm-hmm. I remember even during certain times in the summer, she wouldn't let us use water at certain points of the day, as if that made a difference. But that impacts people's wallets, mm-hmm. you know, and everybody in Annapolis isn't rich. And so, I mean, it's really nothing you can do or change, because you're telling us that we're going to run out of funds, and so we have to do this. But it just sucks, because people are going to have to pay that. Gas is $4.45. I pumped gas this morning, $4.45 a gallon, you know, and then you telling them, oh, also we're going to increase your water bill, your refuse and sewer and all of that. So it's just something to think about. But I mean, I guess the question, you said on the average residential customer, 12,000 gallons. Is that for what, a family of two?
I think that is the statistical average of what a typical residential customer uses in the city. I'm not sure in terms of the number of people per household. It's probably, census in the city, I think it's like 2.5.
Okay, I appreciate this. This is great work, and as the alderwoman mentioned, I appreciate it also projected out long term. But I will follow up with the finance department. I appreciate it, though.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow, it's interesting because we're supposed to be so environmentally conscious, but the water usage hasn't changed much. Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're just as guilty.
Likewise, thank you so much. This has been extraordinarily helpful and enlightening, and we appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you.
All right. Well,
may I ask?
Of course.
Ms.
Ms.
Dickinson, you referenced page 88, and I'm looking at it, and at the bottom it gives the sample quarterly bill. So considering all of these funds, an average bill would go up $10?
Yes, per quarter.
If all of the percentage.
Per quarter, sorry, per quarter. The bills go out on a quarterly basis. It's $10 per quarter.
$10 a quarter is
Yes.
what it would be. Okay. So that is inclusive of all of the funds?
All of those rates.
Okay.
And that's an average single-family residential home. There are different rates for different sizes, different meters in some commercial properties, et cetera, so the rates vary.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
No, we were just talking, and what we were thinking is we can usually explain it by inflation, but the product is water, and how do you explain it, what the cost? You're nodding your head, right? Right. It's a tough one to say it's inflation, because people look at water as a unlimited resource, if you will, and that's what you have to explain, is that it costs money to provide, and you show that in the first couple of slides.
You said it costs money
to supply it.
It costs money to treat it and
Treat
convey
it and all
The
that.
water itself is free. We just suck it out of the ground.
Right.
But to treat it and to get it to homes is an expensive process. And somebody mentioned before that we have old infrastructure. That's particularly true with water. We have really old infrastructure with water, so a lot of the costs are to replace and upgrade our water system. With the sewer system, you can line the pipes, so that's a lot cheaper process, but with water, you replace pipes. generally, so that's much more expensive.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yeah, just a comment. I remember, I don't know how many years it's been, where we had to triple our water rates because we had not increased our water rate for like 15 years. It was something really ludicrous, but we had not.
Yeah,
and I'll
and
tell
that's
you,
when Dave Hyder and I first got to know each other, because we brought him in to do the study, and that was in about 2010 or 11, and the water and sewer rates hadn't been increased since 1999. So it was overall about a 60% increase overall. And so we had lots of good friends there, and I was brand new to the city. I thought I was going to get run out of town at that point in time.
And-
Yeah.
Well, and the complaints that I got the most when we did that was from folks who water their lawns. And because they got $2,000 water bills. And after I explained that we hadn't raised the rates in, all these years, they changed their habits. So maybe they watered every other day as opposed to every day, but have not heard a concern since we did that. So, once you explain what we're doing, it's acceptable. Nobody wants to not have water or sewer or whatever, so.
Or trash.
Thank you. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you very much.
Are we still able to give people money from the American Rescue Plan for their water bills?
That was from the CARES fund?
Oh, from the CARES, oh, okay.
Right.
Right.
There is a new program that's come out at the county level.
Oh.
I'm sorry, at the state, and that we're participating in now. It's very similar to that just started. And there's supposed to be something posted on our website to direct citizens to it.
Oh, wow, that's great. Thank you, Jody, Director Dickinson. All right, well, with that, I think we've completed our agenda.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Where's
thank you so
I'm going to
much
catch my
for-
Frisbee now?
What's that?
I'm going to catch my Frisbee now? I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding.
You get green for money.
I was joking.
And I'm going to let Alderman O'Neill try again. Redeem.
I didn't know this was a common thing. Sure. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
We're all definitely.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
All righty.
Motion to adjourn?
I have a question for for the city manager. We were looking yesterday at the schedule,
Right.
and we have a council meeting scheduled during MML. So, yeah, what is it, the 13th?
Is that in September?
It's the June
No,
13th.
In June.
The first June meeting.
Approval of the
So
budget.
usually, we change that meeting to the following week.
So the first meeting in June where we talk about all the amendments, that's actually like the third or, hold on,
The
the
6th?
6th, Monday the 6th. And so that next week on the 13th is when your meeting strikes the budget.
Well, when is MML, is the question, because we don't meet during MML.
If MML is on the 13th and you are going to do something with that meeting date, I'll have to know, because I just told the county that we'd have our tax rates to them by the 14th, so.
Okay, well, that's why I'm raising the
Yeah,
issue now.
yeah.
We need to
I
change
mean, we'll
that
have to
date.
know and give them a forewarning.
The summer conference is June 12th through the 15th.
Okay, so,
The following Monday.
Ocean
is
City.
17th of September,
Yeah,
which means
but-
that city employees.
okay, then that would change our meeting to Tuesday.
Well, it's going to be all through Tuesday, too.
It's going to be, I'm sorry?
The 12th through the 15th.
Yeah, well, Alderwoman O'Neill was saying that we're observing Juneteenth on that Monday, the 20th, which would kick us into the next day, which would be the 21st.
So I'm almost positive that the county needs our tax rate approved before June 20th, or they won't be able to get the bills produced on July 1st. So that's why we've done this first Monday in June special meeting, and then the second Monday in June is the date where we finally approve the budget. So we may have to work with Regina to come up with another date.
So we may just have to do it that week. So we do the full day meeting on the 6th, and then maybe on Thursday that week, we do a special council meeting to approve the budget.
Yeah, we have to advertise the amended version of the budget on this, that we come up with on the 6th. We have to advertise the amended version, and there's some certain waiting period for that advertisement so that the public can give some feedback. So that's something we need the Office of Law and the clerk's office to try to schedule out.
Okay. So if we can work on that so that we will, there's Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays. I'm kidding now.
So May, the meeting in May is really the meeting in May 26th that's the amendment day, right?
The 16th was amendment day. Deadline. 17th.
We're talking about the day we meet to talk about all of
I'm
16th is the due date
Yes.
for amendments. The 26th is the work session where we discuss the amendments that have been.
So by the 26th, we should have, or you should have enough to have like a draft of all the revisions. So to David's point,
Right.
we could meet, well, I guess again, June 6th. Yeah, I mean, we should be in good shape by June 6th so that we could just meet the following day or two, right? Yeah.
As long as
Yeah.
you've properly advertised the amended, because your votes on the amendments will take place on Monday, the 6th. So we have to fix the bill with the amendments shown, and then advertise the amended version of the ordinance and the resolutions.
Yeah.
So that, there's a requirement on how many days it has to be advertised for.
Okay.
And there may even be a public hearing
But
requirement on the amended bill. I'm not sure about that.
prior to 6th, you've done some legwork on those amendments.
Yes,
Yeah.
they'll be out there, they'll be discussed, everybody will know what they are, we will have drafted them,
There you go.
but your
Yeah.
vote on the amendments makes them official.
I know.
Okay, so that's when you have to re-advertise,
June
once it's
6th.
official.
June 6th.
So
June 6th.
potentially
June
we
6th.
could meet later that same week if there's adequate time between when we meet on the 6th and when you would have the amendments
Yes,
all
potentially.
codified in the.
Again, I'll have to defer to the Office of Law on the requirements for advertising and public hearing.
So, okay.
When would the public hearing be held? You think there would be a public hearing on the amendments?
I don't know. I don't remember if we have to hold a public hearing. If we did, it might be that day that we take the final vote, the Monday, the 13th, would have been that day that we have a public hearing for any comments. Like I said, that's just based on my recollection. I'm not looking at anything to give you that
Yeah.
official.
Well, if the amendments are in by the 16th, the public will not know about them until the 6th?
You haven't, the issue is, your vote on June 6th makes those amendments official. So it's not an amended bill until, anytime you amend a bill, you have to re-advertise.
I understand that, and that's why I said the 3 days.
Yeah, and I don't know how many days we need that week to do it.
But I was asking about the public hearing, if it's required.
I don't know. I don't know where
On
we'd
the
put that. I don't know if that would be on the day you vote on it, or if that would be somewhere in between.
What did we do last year?
You voted on all the amendments on the first Monday in June, and on the second Monday in June, you had your regular scheduled meeting and voted on the final amended budget.
No public hearing, or?
I don't remember. Takia believes
Takia
there's
said
a
yes.
public hearing in there somewhere.
Will come after you vote on the amendment.
Wait a minute.
After we approve the amendments?
After you approve the amendments, the public hearing would happen after. Because you have a new bill. You have I think.
She doesn't mean the same day, she means after, just some date after.
Because once it's amended, unless you guys vote that it's not substantial.
Well, okay, so you're
Well, it
talking,
depends on what the amendments are.
Exactly. So that's why the public hearing happens the meeting after.
I remember.
It may be that if the amendments are considered non-substantive,
Yeah.
you didn't have to have a public hearing, so that, again, I would talk to Mike Lyles about that, make sure that
We
we're
have a
scheduled.
work,
The legislation.
the work session is open, not that,
Your amendments could possibly change the legislation.
whether or not they're
Depends on how
substantial.
substantial they are.
So are we saying the public hearing would be after the 6th?
Yes.
So potentially it could be the same week.
Depending on the advertising
Yeah.
requirements. And
Well,
Jacqueline
this
is
is what
here
needs to be.
today, so we can get that question answered.
I'm pretty sure last year we did it all in one meeting. Are they substantial? No, just so that they could meet their deadline with the county. That's the drop dead is.
But the
So,
Tax yield rate,
okay, well,
that
we
had
have
to
to
have a public
conclude
hearing
here,
as
and, so,
When do we do that? When do we set the tax rate?
that's,
When you take the final vote
final
on the
vote.
budget, the tax rate is included in that ordinance. That's when you officially set the tax rate.
So is that on the 6th, or is that the final vote?
That's the
of the
final.
legislation as amended?
That is the final vote.
Okay.
And if you ever ran into a situation where you wanted to amend the tax rate to something different, you would do that on the 6th with the amendments.
Because I recall us having people coming to speak about the tax rate. So.
And we do have a public hearing in May for the budget as a whole, for what we have proposed so far in the ordinance. There is a public hearing in May. But what we're saying is when we amend it, then it's changed, then we may or may not have a public hearing.
So could that public hearing address the tax rate also? The public,
Both of them could address, anybody could come forward and talk about the tax rate on either one, because the tax rate is stated in the ordinance. It's one of those little sections in the ordinance is where we set the tax rate.
okay. And Ross is not here for me to ask, is it the constant yield or the constant comment?
The constant yield, we're going to advertise that early in May, and on your second May meeting, we will have a public hearing for the constant yield.
Okay.
all right. I was just trying to find it in the code, and,
Trying to find,
well, they have the dates for the operating budget, but I didn't see setting the fee. All right. So, did we have a motion on the floor to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second it, I think Alderwoman O'Neill.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, well, we'll come back tomorrow with the date.
Thanks for-
Thank you.